Welcome to Pick Me Up, I'm Scared, the podcast.
I'm your host, Madeline.
And I'm your co-host, Kenna.
All right, Kenna, do you know what episode it is?
Oh, it's episode 69.
It is episode 69.
Woo!
Kenna, do you have any ideas about what super sexy topic I chose for our 69th episode?
Ooh, I hope it's something horny. Sorry, that sounded weird to say. I apologize.
That's okay. That's okay. You can be horny on Maine just this once.
Ooh.
Well, I wanted to make it like a really sexy episode.
Ooh.
Like really sexy. So then I was trying to think and I was like, what's super sexy? Like what's the sexiest thing I can think about? And then I was like, maybe it's just like sex, obviously. And I was like, what are you going to talk about sex? You know, and then I was like, maybe it's pornography. And then I was like, oh, it's not really interesting to talk about pornography. And then I was like, oh, maybe it's sex work. But then I was like, I feel like we should really have a sex worker on to talk about their own experiences if we do that. And then I was like, no, none of this is sexy enough. So I sat down and I really tried to think about like the sexiest thing I could. And I think I figured it out.
Oh, butts.
Yeah, it's a whole episode about butts. You got it. No, it's not about butts.
Juicy butts.
Yeah, it's about Genuine's process writing the song My Pony. Just kidding. It's not about that either. Although one of our friends did karaoke that song and a man died while she was singing it.
Oh shit, too sexy.
Too sexy. It was the last thing that man ever heard or saw was my friend karaokeing Genuine My Pony.
Wow.
Yeah.
Unrelated. To have that power in your hands.
I know. And then she was like, it was like a karaoke bar, so the lights were in her eyes, so she couldn't see that it was happening, so she just kept going, not realizing. No. Yeah, I know. And I'm like, I think that's how I'd like to go out.
Yeah.
Why not?
Why not?
Why not? Okay, so it's not Genuine My Pony. It is, are you ready?
Yes.
Maybe the closest thing the United States has ever had to a vanguard fighting for a full-blown socialist revolution.
Oh.
Can you guess what I decided the sexiest thing was for 69th episode? Do you know what it is?
No.
It's the Black Panther Party.
Nice.
Okay, so like, obviously it's not actually super sexy. I just realistically really struggled to find a sexy topic. And I couldn't think of anything. And I know that like the fight to end racism and systemic oppression and capitalism isn't exactly sexy like we think of it. But in honor of our 69th episode, I thought maybe it was sexy in the other way. You know, where sometimes stories are sexy, air quotes, because they have everything you want to make a good story.
Because they're cool.
There's intrigue, there's a little violence, there's good people fighting for what's right in the world, and there's the United States government just trying to murder them. There's everything it takes to make a captivating story. And not, you know, sexy in the way where it's like you're hypersexualizing like black people in society with their struggles for liberation. No, sexy like it would make a good Hollywood blockbuster movie directed by Michael Bay.
Yes.
Right. So I thought, maybe not in a horny way, maybe in an exciting, pay attention, this is going to captivate you kind of way. Our 69th episode being about the Black Panther Party just kind of makes sense.
Cool.
All right, so before we get into it, do you want to do any like general housekeeping for the episode?
Oh, yeah, I guess. Thank you so much for listening. And if you like to listen to us more and get more bonus content, we do have a Patreon. And we just did a bonus episode where we talk about Marx's 10-point plan with David, who is a fan favorite.
Yeah, everybody loves David on the pod. So if you liked David on our episode about hauntings, you can see more of him or hear more of him on our Patreon.
Yeah, and right now it is only $2 a month at patreon.com/pickmeupimscared. But it probably will go up in the very, very near future. So I would get in now at the $2 level.
Yes. And also today we are going to, after we record our normal episode, we are going to record and post another highly requested episode on our Patreon just for our subscribers. That's going to be all about budgeting.
Yes.
Capitalism survival skill budgeting.
And there probably will be like a spreadsheet that you can follow along to do your budget with.
Yes, we're going to try to figure all that out. So if you're interested in that, it's patreon.com/pickmeupimscared. It is $2. We love your $2. We appreciate your $2. But also, if you don't want to do the $2 thing, we are going to talk about the Black Panther Party here right now.
Yeah. You're all good.
So, I'm really sorry that I'm nerdy and couldn't think of like a fun, sexy topic. Maybe our 169th episode. That'll give me enough time.
To do butts.
To do butts. Yeah, just write about butts. Yeah, that'll be it. It'll just be a very, very slow 2 hours.
You're like, the butt is made up of these muscles, also called the glutes.
Oh, that's more than I actually knew about butts. Maybe you could do the butt episode.
Yeah, then it might not make me like butts anymore.
You just get like too scienced out on butts.
Yeah, just like all I think about now is, the muscle fibers.
And then it can't be sexy. Oh my God, you're desexualizing it. Wow, with science. Science is beautiful. Well, instead, what we're going to talk about is the story of the Black Panther Party, which is full of a lot of beautiful and inspiring moments of strength in the face of oppression, of people fighting for what's right in the world, of this idea that maybe, just maybe, the good guys could actually win a little something once in a while. But it is also, yes, the story of brutal U.S. oppression, of heartbreaking assassinations and outright murders, of the ugliness and violence of the U.S. capitalist machine, and of what can happen when revolutionary movements are torn apart from the inside.
Yeah, I just recently watched that movie. I believe it's Judas and the Black Messiah.
Yes.
Very good movie.
Yes, totally. And that's super relevant here. There's some espionage in here on behalf of the FBI. J. Edgar Hoover has an all-out vendetta against black revolutionaries.
Yeah.
There's a lot of inside men, a lot of con artists in the game.
Yeah. Also, a lot of cool style. If you've ever seen the Agnes Varda movie, where it was just like a mini documentary about the Black Panthers in San Francisco in the 60s while she was there. And it just looks so cool.
Well, their style is so good, but that's actually like part of the revolutionary thing too. Like, first of all, obviously the politics of hair, like for black people to wear their hair natural in the 60s and 70s was an act of liberation. It was an act of defiance because so much about like the United States, like white supremacy machine said that you had to have your hair relaxed and do all these things to make it look like white hair. But then also, like the fashion statements, like it was imposing, it was militant, and it was fashionable, and it was cool. And a lot of that, too, was to make a statement about Black power.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really cool because it's an example of how fashion is like a tool of artistic expression used to communicate, like anything else in language, right? You're communicating a point. And so much about the Black Panthers, it was political and it was social, and I don't mean this to say that it didn't have like teeth and grit and wasn't doing something real, because it did a lot of really, really good things, but a lot about their movement too was aesthetic. It was aesthetically imposing in a way that communicated their message. And as someone who loves fashion, I think that's like such a great example of how fashion can be used as like a revolutionary tool.
Yeah.
Similar to back during the French Revolution, when the revolutionaries wore a thin red velvet ribbon around their neck to symbolize the wealthy getting their heads chopped off.
Wow.
Yes, right?
We should make that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. There's a lot of good, actually, revolutionary fashion. There's actually this, okay, so this is unrelated before we get into it, but there is this, I'm not going to call it revolutionary fashion. I'm going to call it dumb rich kid fashion, but it was so funny to me that I kind of appreciate it. So basically, after the French Revolution, all these rich kids were like, life is meaningless. All of our friends were beheaded for being rich. So then they just became like fashion bimbos. We're talking like, this is like some Paris Hilton equivalency, and it's like always eat the rich. It's always eat the rich. But these rich kids just started wearing ridiculous outfits that like for the men were like too tight and too long and too scrunched, and they couldn't move right, and like the collars of their shirts covered their mouths, and their hair flopped down too long, and their jacket sleeves were so long they couldn't use their hands, and their pants were so tight they couldn't walk. And then the women wanted to look like these Greco-Roman statues, so they would just wear these very sheer, long, flowing gowns no matter what the weather. And they were transparent. They were totally see-through, which was scandalous. And then they would wet them so they'd be even more transparent, so you could see their naked bodies underneath them. But because they were cold and wet all the time for fashion, basically their immune system started to get shot because they were so busy directing energy towards trying to warm themselves up that it made them more susceptible to disease, and then they would get sick and die.
Whoa.
Yeah.
So goth.
Pretty goth, yeah, right? It was like rich kid goth fashion, and they were called the Incredibles and the Marvelous, but in French. So I don't speak French, so what? Incroyable, marvelous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Incroyable?
No.
I mean, my French pronunciation is terrible.
I mean, the only thing I know how to say in French is "Where is the bank?" and it took me 6 hours to learn how to say it. Où est le banque?
I just know, oui.
But yeah, so that was like rich kid fashion. You know, it's not revolutionary. It's the opposite of Black Panther Party, but it is just kind of a funny story about the politics of fashion that I always liked. Yeah, so, you know, that's probably sexier than the episode, actually, because those chicks were looking naked in there.
Yeah.
That's sexier than
now I feel bad about starting the episode too horny. I'm like, oh, no.
You can be horny for a revolution, Kenna. You can be horny for a revolution. Yeah, so that said, not a sexy episode, but maybe still a little horny.
No!
We're going to strap in and learn all about the beauty and tragedy and legacy of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense here in the United States, a socialist black activism group that ran from 1966 to 1982. And before we get too far down into this, I want to do a content warning. We will mention slavery, violence against black bodies, and sexual assault, but we will do our best not to be too gratuitous about it. We will only provide it as a necessary basis for the context for everything the Black Panthers were fighting for and against. So, to start it off, we've got to start where everything in the United States history starts, with violence, colonization, genocide, and slavery.
Ooh.
Yeah, so we're starting out the 69th episode the opposite of what I told you we would do for this. I'm really sorry. I'm so sorry. But you really can't tell the story of anything that happens in the United States without going back to this, right? So we're going to breeze past it, but obviously the history of the United States is one based on the enslavement and oppression of marginalized people, and especially of black and indigenous people in particular. So from 1525 to 1865, we know 12 million people were enslaved and transported from Africa to what white people then called the New World, which is like a weird term because it always existed. And it was horrifying, right? We know this. People were treated as property, people were tortured, people were violently abused, people were left to die because it was cheaper to replace an enslaved person than help them stay well or help them live. I'm not going to get too into it, but if you want more details, we do a more detailed outline in our episode on prison abolition because it is super relevant there, which is episode number 5, called Keep Your Community Safe, Abolish Your Local Prison. I think the more interesting thing to point out here is the ways in which enslaved black people fought back against this, were resilient, formed communities, built cultural experiences through this trauma, and that's really the basis for the American cultural experience I think that we see today. A lot of American culture is the culture of black people who built our cities literally through violent oppression, but also built our country metaphorically through providing us with things like music and art and food, the building blocks of our cultural experiences. That's like the basis for Americana as we think of it, right? Like all music in the United States today pretty much came from black culture, like house music, rock and roll, country, like it all stems from this. And I think one of the things we talked about when we did our book club, we read Black Marxism by Cedric Robinson. He talks about the spirit of black rebellion. And I think that's super important to provide the context for what the Black Panthers would later do in the 1960s. The spirit of black rebellion has always been something that rejected like the capitalist hegemony of white supremacy and, you know, all of those things. Like black rebellion has always been done in a different spirit. It's been done in a spirit of community and kinship and helping each other. And I think that that's super relevant for what we're going to get into. So, yeah, basically, after hundreds of years of white people being the fucking worst, the Emancipation Proclamation was finally issued on September 22nd, 1862. And this freed 3 million people from slavery. And then finally in 1865, the 13th Amendment was passed, freeing all enslaved people and officially making slavery illegal, except for as punishment for a crime. Remember that whole thing? That whole loophole? Right. Which is just a super scary loophole that now means black people can be forced to work for free as long as you catch them doing something illegal first, right?
Yeah.
And pretty much that serves as the basis for our entire prison system, which is why I think our episode on prison abolition is good if you want to get more into the details of that. This isn't an episode about prison, But it is important to remember that the police in our country come from this legacy. Like, they come from this history of protecting property, also from viewing black bodies as property, and from being deputized to round up black people who are breaking the law and throw them into prison to make them work for companies. And any black people who step out of line are made examples of. And this is the atmosphere as we kind of enter the next period, which is segregation. So after slavery becomes almost or mostly illegal in the United States, we see this period of segregation, right, which goes from 1865 arguably up until today. Like, lots of people argue segregation is still a thing in the United States, especially for things like our school systems. Like, Kenna, have you lived anywhere that you really saw a lot of segregation?
I mean, Colorado's like not so much, but when I went to South Carolina to visit my friend one summer in high school, I felt like I was like, whoa.
Yeah, like, where I grew up in Fresno, I felt like it was pretty integrated because it was what was called a minority-majority city. Like, most of the people living there were, like, Latino in some way. But even there, we had a street that divided the wealthier, whiter part of town from the rest of us, you know? And I always thought that was pretty extreme. And then I left Fresno and I moved to Santa Cruz, and I was like, whoa, everyone here is white. And I remember asking my boyfriend, you know, like, where do you keep the poor people? Where do you keep the people who aren't white? Like, what's going on here? And he was like, oh, they're in a different city. They're in Watsonville. And then we went to Watsonville to watch an indoor soccer game, and I was like, oh, shit, this is the most segregation I've ever seen. Like, it's literally like a whole city of poor brown people right next door to a whole city of rich white people.
Yeah.
So these kinds of things, like segregation, is still pretty prominent, and there's a lot of activists, especially black activists today, fighting to address the segregation that still remains. So, you know, basically around 1865, when slavery was made illegal, mostly, right, what happened is a bunch of white people then started this process of systematically denying resources to black people, which resulted in areas and communities that were predominantly white or predominantly black. And obviously the predominantly white areas received preferential treatment in terms of things like housing and banking and schools and jobs. And I feel like a lot of the episodes we've done have touched on this. We talk about redlining in an episode. We talk about R1 zoning. That's a byproduct of this. We talk about the school to prison pipeline in communities of color. That's a byproduct of this. So just a lot of the bad stuff we see today that has to do with inequality really gets started around this time. And, you know, some black people, despite having so many obstacles around this time, still managed to build really successful communities away from white people. Many of which were like Greenwood in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where Black Wall Street was based, and they had, you know, their own businesses, their own homes, and when the Great Depression hit, they were able to like withstand that better than the white communities did. But of course, whenever we see communities of color getting too successful within the United States, oh, I just dropped my phone. It seems like something always happens that like destroys them. Have you noticed this?
Yeah, the Tulsa, Oklahoma thing. If you've ever seen the first episode of the HBO series, The Watchmen, like it literally shows what happens, and you think at first, like if you don't know about it, you think it's just like part of an action movie, but it was literally real. Yeah,
exactly. So basically what happened is Greenwood in Tulsa, Oklahoma was a thriving black district, and white people basically got jealous and mad and came and violently destroyed it all and took it from people. It was this really harrowing, awful, horrifying thing. And you know, also things like, I just learned this, but Central Park, there was a thriving black community in Central Park, and the community was destroyed to build the park. People were kicked out of there.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah, and then one of my friends also told me that underneath the Twin Towers, there was the remnants of a thriving, like, free black community that were destroyed to build the Twin Towers as well.
Whoa.
So a lot of American history is stories like this, where you know, white people impose segregation, some black communities manage to thrive despite having all these obstacles, and when they get too successful, white people just come in and wipe it all out anyway. So, you know, this pattern emerges, right, where black people are systematically oppressed, denied access to things that they need just to live a nice life, and after nearly 100 years of this, a civil rights movement emerges in the U.S., right, fighting for equality for black Americans for once and for all. And that kind of brings us to the civil rights movement. So the civil rights movement, as we think of it, runs from 1954 to 1968-ish, right? And we were always taught that it started with Rosa Parks. Do you remember this story?
Yes.
This is like the American myth where it's like Rosa Parks was just a regular woman who one day didn't want to move from the segregated back of the bus or give up her seat for a white man or something like that. But in reality, she was a trained activist.
Really?
This was a planned thing, yeah. And Black activism had been happening around this time. So Rosa Parks, I think that was 1955, if I remember correctly. But activism and civil disobedience movements had always existed in the United States and Black communities, and were kind of ramping up to this. So from 1954 to 1968, we saw more concentrated and heightened periods of civil unrest regarding this continued unfair treatment of Black people in the United States. And Black Americans were protesting segregation and racism, and from this, two major figures emerged who were kind of viewed as leaders, at least by the white establishment, in the Black rights movements. And it was Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. So Martin Luther King Jr., obviously super famous, born in 1929, Atlanta, Georgia, became a Baptist minister, helped lead the civil rights movement from the mid-1950s until he was ultimately assassinated in 1968. And he was the head of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which promoted non-violent tactics like peaceful protest. And part of that was the March on Washington, which happened in 1963, right? That was nonviolent action to help fight for civil rights. And in 1964, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. And he also did some work that managed to legally change segregation laws for Black Americans in the South and other parts of the United States. Now, a lot of people, especially white people today, really lean into Martin Luther King Jr. being nonviolent as a way to try to condemn protests in contemporary civil rights efforts. Have you seen those?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, it's this weird, gross thing where somebody will be like, I'm really mad at the cops because they murdered someone. I'm going to light a Target on fire. And then a white person will be like, Martin Luther King said don't do that. And it's just this really weird thing that some white people do. I don't know. It's super offensive to me. And it has just always struck me as being strange because it's okay, as a white person, how are you going to tell Black people how mad they're allowed to be that the state's murdering them systematically?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then to use Martin Luther King to do it just feels really weird and insidious. I don't know. So I just wanted to throw in that, yeah, Martin Luther King was about, peaceful, nonviolent protest, but he wasn't above direct action. He had some pretty left-leaning opinions, and at the time, people hated him. Yeah. Everybody was really not a fan. So, whatever white Americans today see happening on the news, and then they're like, I can't believe they're doing this. Why wouldn't they be just like Martin Luther King was? You probably would not have been happy with Martin Luther King back in the 1950s or 60s either, if that's your stance. Because he was disruptive. It was a disruption of the status quo. So I have some quotes here from Martin Luther King that people don't talk about very often that I think are important to help set the scene for Black activism at the time. So on April 4th, 1967, Martin Luther King Jr. said, "A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death." He said ACAB means the military too. On March 30th, 1967, he said, "The evils of capitalism are as real as the evils of militarism and racism. The problems of racial injustice and economic injustice cannot be solved without a radical redistribution of political and economic power." Yeah, critiqued capitalism and the military and racism all at once. Also in 1967, he said, "White Americans must recognize that justice for Black people cannot be achieved without radical changes in the structure of our society." Mm-hmm. And another quote from 1967, "Whites, it must frankly be said, are not putting in a similar mass effort to re-educate themselves out of their racial ignorance. It is an aspect of their sense of superiority that the white people of America believe they have so little to learn." Also in 1967, in a speech, he said, "Again, we have deluded ourselves into believing the myth that capitalism grew and prospered out of the Protestant ethic of hard work and sacrifices. Capitalism was built on the exploitation of Black slaves and continues to thrive on the exploitation of the poor, both Black and white, both here and abroad." And that was a pretty good one because it spoke to American imperialism as well. In 1963, in a letter from the Birmingham jail, because he was arrested for his actions, it says, "We know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed." Mm-hmm. So, he wasn't just out there pandering to white people and asking nicely for everyone to stop being mean to them, right? He saw what was going on. Capitalism was interacting with white supremacy and needed to be fought. He just wasn't as militant as other Black activists at the time were, which is why he got the reputation for being nonviolent. And it's worth noting that even with his, somewhat tempered anger, I'll say, righteous anger, definitely, but a tempered presence compared to other Black activists, the U.S. government still hated him. And most Americans hated them. 75% of Americans disliked him at the peak of his activism. And yeah, he was arrested constantly for things like loitering in white spaces. So this was one prominent leader in the Black Civil Rights Movement. And everyone didn't like him. And now, if everybody didn't like him, they really didn't like the other person at all. You know who the other person was, obviously.
Malcolm X.
Malcolm X, right? So kind of on the flip side, but on the same coin, two heads of the same coin, two sides of the same coin, you've got Malcolm X. Malcolm X was radical and smart and charismatic. And in contrast to King's kind of strategy of nonviolence, civil disobedience, and redemptive suffering is what it was called, Malcolm X urged his followers to defend themselves by any means necessary. He rightfully was like, hey, the state, the police, the government is trying to kill you, and you have the right to do whatever you need to do to defend yourself. So he was a civil rights leader from 1955 until 1965, and he would do things like preach on the streets of Harlem, but also he would go give lectures in major universities like Harvard or Oxford. And he was, more radical. So I have some quotes here from Malcolm X. He said, concerning nonviolence, it is criminal to teach a man not to defend himself when he is the constant victim of brutal attacks. He also said, we are nonviolent with people who are nonviolent with us. And he said, if violence is wrong in America, violence is wrong abroad. If it's wrong to be violent defending black women and black children and black babies and black men, then it is wrong for America to draft us and make us violent abroad in defense of her. And if it is right for America to draft us and teach us how to be violent in defense of her, then it is right for you and me to do whatever is necessary to defend our own people right here in this country. Mm-hmm. So both of these leaders had a lot to say about the American military, which I think is really interesting because I feel like now you don't hear people critique the military. It's almost like a taboo to critique the military.
Yeah, and I think, it's especially, back then, it's like people got drafted.
Yes, but I
not saying I think it just was more in your face. Like, my dad got drafted into Vietnam. Like, it was just, like, so prevalent. But yeah, like, shit definitely changed after 9/11. That's
totally true. I think after 9/11 is when it became more taboo to critique U.S. military and imperialism abroad. Mm-hmm. So, Malcolm X was assassinated at just 39 years old. That was on February 21st, 1965. And 3 men were convicted for the killing, but 2 were exonerated in 2021. And now his daughter is suing the CIA and the FBI for wrongful death.
Wow.
Yeah, and that kind of makes sense because on January 22nd, 1969, the FBI released this internal document that's since been declassified that kind of seems like they took full credit for his death, on this internal memo.
Wow.
So these are the 2 main leaders of the civil rights movement that's happening, in the mid-1960s. And this is kind of exactly where we are when the story of the Black Panthers officially starts. In 1966, just 1 year after the death of Malcolm X in the San Francisco Bay Area, and also 2 weeks after an unarmed black teenager named Matthew Johnson was killed by police officers in San Francisco for taking a joyride in a stolen car with 2 of his friends. So here we end up on October 15th, 1966, with the formation of the Black Panther Party. So we see these black student activists, Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale, get together and form this group, the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, at Merritt College in Oakland, California. So originally, they were part of this study group called the Afro-American Association, and Seale and Newton had both been involved in black cultural organizations and anti-poverty programs, but both of them were pretty frustrated by the limitations of those organizations, especially when it came to addressing issues like police violence. They were in the Bay Area. They had just seen 2 weeks before police brutally assassinate a teenager for stealing a car, and I know lots of people are like, well, don't break the law if you don't want to get shot by the police, which is just so wild and fascist. But even people who break the law should not be shot by the police. When I was a teenager, me and my friend stole a car. A lot of people I know, when they were teenagers, they stole cars. That should not be a death sentence. That is literal fascism, right? So, Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale were like, hey, this is really frustrating. A lot of these kind of organizations we're working with, they're not addressing this issue of police violence. So they splintered off from the Afro-American Association and started this new group, right? The Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. Both Newton and Seale had some things in common. They were raised in Oakland, but they were both born in the South. And their families had moved to Oakland as part of this thing that was a second wave of the Great Migration, which was rural Southern black people moving out of the South to the North and the West. And they kind of had different stories. Like in the 1960s, Seal was working as an expert sheet metal mechanic at Kaiser Aerospace and Electronics. And in 1962, he heard Malcolm X speak to this crowd of like 7,000 people about civil rights issues at the Oakland Auditorium. And a year later, he quit his job and he was like, I'm going to work in grassroots community organizing instead. Unlike other more kind of pacifist organizers at the time, though, Seal believed that Black people had the right to defend themselves from a country where white supremacy found new and horrifying ways to try to murder them every day. Meanwhile, Huey P. Newton, where his story kind of differed, is that he graduated from high school, but he was illiterate. And he had to teach himself how to read before attending Merritt College, which is where he ended up meeting Seal.
Whoa.
Yeah, so in 1966, there was this other kind of Black student leader who was getting popular around college campuses at the time, and it was Stokely Carmichael. And Stokely Carmichael is the person who popularized the slogan Black Power at a rally in Greenwood, Mississippi. So the civil rights movement, remember at this time, is like really happening everywhere. It's getting intense. But younger participants are starting to question the civil rights movement's association with the Democratic Party. Younger, more radical Black youth viewed the Democratic Party as kind of this like moderating force of nothingness. And younger radical Black activists were starting to reject capitalism completely. And they wanted to defend themselves, just like Huey P. Newton wanted to, or Bobby Seale wanted to, right? Like, they didn't like this idea that they should just sit by and ask nicely. So as Carmichael said, white people beat up Black people every day. Don't nobody talk about nonviolence. But as soon as Black people start to move, the double standard comes into being. You can't defend yourself. That's what you're saying. And this was resonating with a lot of people. And Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale were part of this new, more radical youth movement towards Black power that emphasized this idea that, hey, we are being attacked. We are under attack constantly, and we should be able to defend ourselves. So a former Black Panther captain named Aaron Dixon would later write that the party attracted a rough breed of men and women into its ranks: hustlers, ex-thieves, and crooks. These men had felt the direct effects of police brutality. They had seen up close the crookedness and corruption of police authorities. And Bobby Seale says, you know, the Black Panther Party grew out of my heart, mind, and soul. My concept was this: how do we organize a political electoral unit in our African American communities, extended across the United States of America, and coalesce with all other peoples who are oppressed? How do we do that? And this was kind of the spirit of starting the Black Panther Party. They wanted to reach average people on the street. They wanted to reach people who had been directly affected by police brutality. And they wanted to come up with a message that really fought back against the police, who they saw as being like the strong arm of like American oppression in Black communities. So they developed this theory, the platform, the ideology behind the party. And they drew from a lot of different sources to do this. A big influence that I don't see people mention so much was kind of this idea of Afrofuturism. Like, what would Malcolm X be fighting for if he had lived past February 1965? So because of Malcolm X, they were inspired by Black nationalism, but they were also inspired by socialism and Marxist-Leninism and Mao. And they were also even inspired a little bit by the Declaration of Independence. So we see this in their development of the Black Panther Party's 10-point program. So on October 15th, 1966, they wrote the first version of the Black Panther Party 10-point program. Have you ever heard of it, Kenna? Have you heard it?
I think I've heard of it, but I don't think I've heard it.
Okay. I've always loved this. I remember the first time I read this, I was a teenager. I was maybe 13 or 14, and I was first starting to get into Assata Shakur, the Black Panthers, and Angela Davis. And the first time I read this, it gave me chills. And when I read it now, still, it gives me chills, because this is what people, and especially Black community activists, are still fighting for today, with the exception of maybe one point on their program, number 6, which was kind of geared towards the military draft, like we were talking about earlier. We don't have the draft anymore, but we do still see the U.S. military aggressively targeting low-income communities of color for recruitment.
Yeah.
So, without further ado, here are the 10 points in the Black Panther Party 10-point program. Number 1, they said, we want freedom. We want power to determine the destiny of our Black community. We believe that Black people will not be free until we are able to determine our destiny. Number 2, we want full employment for our people. We believe that the federal government is responsible and obligated to give every man employment or a guaranteed income. We believe that if the white American businessman will not give us full employment, then the means of production should be taken from the businessman and placed in the community so that the people of the community can organize and employ all of its people and give a high standard of living. Number 3, we want an end to the robbery by the capitalists of our Black community. We believe that this racist government has robbed us, and now we are demanding the overdue debt of 40 acres and 2 mules. 40 acres and 2 mules were promised 100 years ago as restitution for slave labor and mass murder of Black people. We will accept the payment in currency, which will be distributed to our many communities. The Germans are now aiding the Jews in Israel for the genocide of the Jewish people. The Germans murdered 6 million Jews. The American racist has taken part in the slaughter of over 50 million Black people. Therefore, we feel that this is a modest demand that we make. We want decent housing fit for the shelter of human beings. We believe that if the white landlords will not give decent housing to our Black community, then the housing and the land should be made into cooperatives so that our community, with government aid, can build and make decent housing for its people. We want education for our people that exposes the true nature of this decadent American society. We want education that teaches us our true history and our role in the present-day society. We believe in an educational system that will give to our people a knowledge of self. If a man does not have knowledge of himself and his position in society and the world, then he has little chance to relate to anything else. We want all Black men to be exempt from military service. We believe that Black people should not be forced to fight in the military service to defend a racist government that does not protect us. We will not fight and kill other people of color in the world who, like Black people, are being victimized by the white racist government of America. We will protect ourselves from the force and violence of the racist police and the racist military by whatever means necessary. We want an immediate end to police brutality and the murder of Black people. We believe we can end police brutality in our Black community by organizing Black self-defense groups that are dedicated to defending our Black community from racist police oppression and brutality. The Second Amendment to the Constitution of the United States gives a right to bear arms. We therefore believe that all Black people should arm themselves for self-defense. We want freedom for all Black men held in federal, state, county, and city prisons and jails. We believe that all Black people should be released from the many jails and prisons because they have not received a fair and impartial trial. We want all Black people, when brought to trial, to be tried in a court by a jury of their peer group or people from their Black communities, as defined by the Constitution of the United States. We believe that the court should follow the United States Constitution so that Black people will receive fair trials. The 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution gives a man a right to be tried by his peer group. A peer is a person from a similar economic, social, religious, geographical, environmental, historical, and racial background. To do this, the court will be forced to select a jury from the Black community from which the Black defendant came. We have been and we are being tried by all white juries that have no understanding of the average reasoning man of the Black community. We want land, bread, housing, education, clothing, justice, and peace. When, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitled them, a decent respect of the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with a certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute a new government, laying its foundations on such principles, and organizing its powers in such form, as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experiences has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursing invariably the same object, invices a design to reduce them to utter absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. So I really liked this. I think this is really cool. It's funny, you can see the Declarations of Independence stuff at the end.
Yeah.
But it's kind of tongue-in-cheek. It's like, you wrote this Constitution, now do it.
Yeah.
And also things in the Constitution about how the founding fathers of America, whatever, they were all assholes, but how they were like, yeah, when the government doesn't serve the people, you have to overthrow it and form a new one.
Yeah, I've always thought about that, how, like no one who, like, after 9/11, like, thought, like, oh, I mean, except for, like, it seems like weird right-wing people.
Right.
Like, if this shit isn't working, like, change it.
Right. But that's basically what they were saying. They're like, look, this hasn't worked for black people for a really, really long time. You can hear a lot of the commie influence in there. You know, they talk about how there's the right to full employment, you know, for people to own the means of production in their communities so that everybody can have a decent living. And there's also some stuff in there that I just think is really, really poignant today, especially things about the right to be tried in a court by a jury of your peers. That's the part that always really gave me chills, because it's like, we don't do that today. Yeah. We hear all of these stories about innocent black men wrongfully convicted of crimes, and how many of them are tried by a jury of black people. Mm-hmm. This also makes me think about, too, you know how, like, police all live in their own little police communities, and they don't live in the communities they police?
Yeah.
And a lot of experts have said that this leads to the dehumanization that police feel towards people when they go to work and they're, like, driving around their little area, their precinct or whatever. Not precinct, because that's, like, the actual location, the building, but what's it called? Like, their little district they patrol.
District?
No, whatever it is. But what happens is that they're so far removed from that community, they can't tell when something's suspicious or not. They have no reference point for it.
Yeah, they just think everyone's suspicious.
They think everyone's suspicious, exactly. Like, if you, like, to put Los Angeles in perspective, like, if you come from Beverly Hills and then you go to Westlake on the east side of town, Beverly Hills is very, very affluent. Everybody in Westlake's just kind of broke and trying to get by. You're not going to know what looks sketchy or suspicious. This isn't your culture. You don't understand what's happening here. So how can you adequately police it? And I think about that same thing when it comes to, like, the juries. Like, if you're on a jury and you're so far removed from the cultural experiences of the people you're talking about, how do you know what's normal in that community?
Yeah.
There's no way to know. So this is the 10-point program that Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale come up with. And their goal in founding the Black Panther Party was to appeal to the people they called brothers on the block. So Bobby Seale said, I don't care what kind of cat is on the block. If he doesn't relate to anything else, he can relate to the 10-point platform and program of the Black Panther Party. So I thought this was really interesting because there's theory in here, yeah, but a lot of leftists and socialist organizing groups, they really emphasize theory and, like, having a strong understanding of theory. And what the Black Panthers were saying was, look, we've read some theory, we've got the theory, we know what we want, we came up with this platform. You don't have to read it. You don't have to read Mao. You don't have to read Marx. You don't have to read Lenin. You just have to relate to the things we're telling you now. And they really took these concepts and distilled them and made them easy to understand and super relatable for the average black person in the United States. Now, starting out, they did sell, like copies of Mao, in order to get funding. And they did sell some literature and some theory. But you didn't have to be a Marxist or have read theory to be a Black Panther. And I thought that was super interesting.
Yeah, it's, like, funny to me how it seems like sometimes, like, just, like, this is just very anecdotal in my experience. Like, some, like, groups seem to be more about, like, theory or, like, something you would, like, argue in, like, a graduate studies classroom than actually be like, this is what we're doing. Right.
And the Black Panther Party, they really were conscious of that. And they're like, no, it doesn't make sense for us to dwell on the theory. We just should do things that benefit the community.
Yeah. And I think that actually, like, being, like, so, like, I don't know what the word, like...
dogmatic, maybe?
Yeah. Or, like, graduate studies speak with, like, keeps people from actually doing, like mutual aid or, like, helping people out. Because it's, like... it seems too much. You're just like, there's a lot going on here.
Right, totally. And I do think it was interesting. I have a whole section where we're going to talk about the communism and socialism of the Black Panther Party. Because they did consider themselves to be the vanguard of the movement, which is obviously a reference to Marxist-Leninist principles of the vanguard party in communism, which is the people who know the theory who are going to lead the revolution. It's not a political party in the more traditional sense where you vote for change and you play the game. It's a revolutionary arm of people who are well-versed in theory, who know what they're doing. They're like, hey, come with us. We're going to fight the power.
Yeah.
And that's a Leninist principle. That's something Lenin brought to Marxism. But not everybody in the Black Panther Party identified as a Marxist. The leaders of the party did, though. So that meant that a lot of the guiding principles of Black Panther Party were, yes, communist, even if most Black Panther members, just rank and file members, would not consider themselves communists. One of the main reasons that they embraced Marxism, and in particular Marxist-Leninism, was that it was an anti-imperialist ideology, and it supported the right for oppressed people to work towards self-determination. So founder Huey P. Newton said, "We realized that this country became very rich upon slavery, and that slavery is capitalism in the extreme. We have two evils to fight, capitalism and racism, and we must destroy both." So the activism of the Black Panther Party was very, very rooted in anti-capitalist ideology, even if, you know, the way that it came out was seeking liberation for Black people. And Bobby Seale said, "We fight racism with solidarity. We do not fight exploitative capitalism with Black capitalism. We fight capitalism with basic socialism." So really kind of going against this idea that, like, we need more Black people to own businesses. They were like, no, we need fewer business owners exploiting people. We need less of the military imperialism going abroad and getting us involved in people's business for the sake of money. Like, we can't fight this with just a different form of capitalism. We need to destroy it. So the Black Panther ideology, you know, it's often expressed by saying the ideology of the Black Panther Party is the historical experience of Black people and the wisdom gained by Black people in their 400-year-long struggle against the system of racist oppression and economic exploitation in Babylon, interpreted through the prism of the Marxist-Leninist analysis by our Minister of Defense, Huey P. Newton. This is what they said. This would be like the summary of the ideology. This is what they would tell you. But, you know, they did clarify. They were relying on their own interpretations of Marxist-Leninism. And they said, we must place heavy emphasis upon that last part of the definition, interpreted by our Minister of Defense. The world of Marxist-Leninism has become a jungle of opinion in which conflicting interpretations from right revisionism to left dogmatism foist off their reactionary and blind philosophies as revolutionary Marxism-Leninism. Around the world and in every nation, people, all who call themselves Marxist-Leninists, are at each other's throats. Such a situation presents serious problems to a young party such as ours that is still in the process of refining its ideology. When we say that we are Marxist-Leninists, we mean that we have studied and understood the classical principles of scientific socialism and that we have adapted these principles to our own situation for ourselves. However, we do not move with a closed mind to new ideas or information. At the same time, we know that we must rely upon our own brains in solving ideological problems as they relate to us. For too long, Black people have relied upon the analyses and ideological perspectives of others. Our struggle has reached a point now where it would be absolutely suicidal for us to continue this posture of dependency. No other people in the world are in the same position as we are, and no other people in the world can get us out of it except for ourselves. There are those who are all too willing to do our thinking for us, even if it gets us killed. However, they are not willing to follow through and do our dying for us. If thoughts bring about our deaths, let them at least be our own thoughts, so that we will have broken once and for all with the flunkyism of dying for every cause and every terror except our own. So that was how they defined this. They were like, look, yeah, we're doing our own version of socialism. It might not look the way all of the dogmatic Marxist-Leninists think socialism should look, but also all these people who are experiencing socialism in Europe or, you know, Russia, all these different places, they haven't been through what we've been through. Nobody's been through the experience of the enslaved Black American. Just we have. And our solutions are going to be a little different because of that. And this actually makes a lot of sense in the context of Marxism. Marx himself acknowledged that revolution would look a little different everywhere, since no two people's oppression was exactly the same. And the Black Panther Party, was also heavily influenced by Maoism, taking on this kind of model that was about serving the people. So when we talk about kind of interpreting these ideas of socialism through, like the Black Panther Party's lens, there's somebody who's really important to talk about, but he's also like a really problematic character. His name is Eldridge Cleaver. So Eldridge Cleaver was the person responsible for clarifying, the Black Panther Party's interpretation of Marxism through the lens of Huey P. Newton, and distilling it into these easy-to-understand concepts for the Panther members. Eldridge Cleaver was the Black Panther Party Minister of Information, and a lot of his thinking can be found in the Black Panther newspaper. Cleaver sought to carry through the founding members' ideologies of how information was distributed. And he once said, one of the great contributions of Huey P. Newton is that he gave the Black Panther Party a firm ideological foundation that frees us from ideological flunkyism and opens up the path to the future. So Eldridge Cleaver really took the ideology of the Black Panther Party, and in particular Huey P. Newton, and solidified it in these kind of easy to understand ways that were then distributed to Black Panther Party members and Black community members through the Black Panther newspaper, which came out really regularly. So he was reconciling the messaging of the Black Panther Party with communism on the whole, and he attributed a lot of Black Panther Party's success in messaging to Huey P. Newton specifically. So he said what Huey did was to provide us the ideology and the methodology for organizing the black urban lumpen proletariat. Armed with this ideological perspective and method, Huey transformed the black lumpen proletariat from the forgotten people at the bottom of society into the vanguard of the proletariat. There's a lot of confusion over whether we are members of the working class or whether we are the lumpen proletariat. It's necessary to confront this confusion because it has had a great deal to do with the strategy and tactics that we follow and with our strained relations with the white radicals from the oppressor section of Babylon. Some so-called Marxist-Leninists will attack us for what we have to say, but that is a good thing and not a bad thing because some people call themselves Marxist-Leninists who are downright enemies of black people. Later for them, we want them to step boldly forward, as they will do, blinded by their own stupidity and racist arrogance, so that it will be easier for us to deal with them in the future. And this is pretty wild, right? Because he's basically like, look, if you're a white Marxist-Leninist and you haven't confronted your own racism and you think you know better what black people in the United States need for our own liberation than us, feel free. Speak up. Speak loudly so we can find you easier and fuck you up. And I really liked that. I thought that was pretty cool. But again, Eldridge Cleaver, not a great person, which we'll get into in a little bit. So, it's hard because a lot of the stuff he says, you're like, yeah, from a black power perspective, that's awesome. But when we get into some of the shit he did, you're going to be like, oh, I really don't want to be a fan of this guy. So, in a few seconds, I'll get there. But back on his subject of how he's kind of talking about black liberation through the lens of Marxism, he says, Marx defined the epoch of the bourgeoisie and laid bare the direction of the proletarian future. He analyzed capitalism and defined the method of its doom. Violent revolution by the proletariat against the bourgeois state apparatus of class oppression and repression. Revolutionary violence against the counter-revolutionary class violence perpetrated through the special repressive force of the armed tentacle of the state. This great definition by Marx and Engels became the mightiest weapon in the hands of oppressed people in the history of the ideology. It marks a gigantic advance for all mankind, and since Marx's time, his definition has become strengthened, further elaborated, illuminated, and further refined. But Marxism has never really dealt with the United States of America. There have been some very nice attempts. People have done the best that they know how. However, in the past, Marxist-Leninists in the United States have relied too heavily upon foreign imported analyses and have seriously distorted the realities of the American scene. We might say that Marxist-Leninism of the past belongs to the gestation period of Marxist-Leninism in the United States, and that now is the time when a new, strictly American ideological synthesis will arise, springing up from the hearts and souls of the oppressed people inside Babylon and uniting people and hurling them mightily from the force of their struggle into the future. So, basically he's like, look, Marx, cool, said some cool shit, we like it. He doesn't know what's happened in the United States. He didn't write about the United States. He doesn't get what's happening in the United States. We like it. We're starting there. We're using that to catapult us into a new future that makes sense for us. And he also said, on the subject of racism, Marxist-Leninism offers us very little assistance. In fact, there's much evidence that Marx and Engels themselves were racist, just like their white brothers and sisters of the era, and just as many Marxist-Leninists of our own time are also racist. Historically, Marxism-Leninism has been an outgrowth of European problems, and it has been primarily preoccupied with finding solutions to European problems. And this is totally true. Marx said some racist weird shit. He said some weird shit about Mexican people once. He's saying weird shit kind of that's racist all the time. So this is a really good call out. And they're acknowledging yeah, we like the ideas of Marxism. We like socialism, but Marx is not a god. He doesn't understand racism. He's part of the white racist class as well. So then they go on and he says, given the racist history of the United States, it's very difficult for black people to comfortably call themselves Marxist-Leninists or anything else that takes its name from white people. We must emphasize the fact that Marx and Lenin did not invent socialism. They only added their contributions, enriching the doctrine just as many others did before them and after them. And we must remember that Marx and Lenin didn't organize the Black Panther Party. Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale did. So this is kind of, what Eldridge Cleaver is talking about. And we see the Panthers building this ideological perspective that they're really strongly considering in relationship both with mainstream Marxism at the time, mainstream communism at the time, but also black nationalism and black liberation. And they say, look, if anyone's going to be the vanguard in the United States, realistically, it will be us. It won't be the Communist Party of the United States. Nobody's even going to those meetings. Who are those meetings even appealing to? We are here. We are invigorating the black community. We will be the revolutionary vanguard force here, whether you like our brand of socialism or not. So, now's where we got to get into, the fact that Eldridge Cleaver is no angel. Unlike some other Black Panthers who are actually pretty forward-thinking in terms of things like equal rights for women and gay people, Eldridge Cleaver was really, really homophobic, and he was a serial rapist.
Ooh.
Yeah, real bad. He both raped white women as an act of political insurrection, very intent and intently, like he had a plan and he went after it. But he also raped poor black women in what he called the ghetto as well. He said that it was practice for his ultimate revenge of assaulting white women. He's a complicated figure. Definitely not someone who fell in line with what so many Black Panther women were fighting for within the party, which was obviously movement towards more gender egalitarianism. But since he was the primary writer on the Marxist and communist components of the Black Panther Party's ideology, we have to include talking about him here because he was the major source for how all of Huey P. Newton's political ideas were kind of distilled. And a lot of his experiences sexually assaulting women didn't come out until he wrote an autobiography years later. I think it was maybe in the 80s where it came out, and he was talking about all this. His wife, though, Kathleen Cleaver, she's an interesting person to consider in all of this as well. So she came from a middle-class black community, and she went to these like prestigious liberal arts colleges like Oberlin, which is where the chick who did Girls went. What's her name? The rich girl, and her mom was like in the art world. You know what I'm talking about?
Lena Dunham?
Lena Dunham, yeah.
I know. I actually have two friends who went to Oberlin, and they tell me all, like, oh yeah, at Oberlin, and I was like, huh?
Yeah, when I was in college, Oberlin offered me a full ride scholarship, but I didn't know anything about college, and I thought it was just like a trashy school in the middle of the country, and I was like, I'm not going to go to this weird school in like Ohio or something. I didn't know where it was.
I don't know if you could make it in Ohio. No offense, Ohioians.
Yeah, I'm not strong enough.
I feel like I'm accidentally offending people that I don't mean to, like graduate studies people.
No, that's fine.
And Ohioans.
Ohio.
I just know you and the weather. I don't think you would make it in Ohio. I don't think I can handle it.
I'm not strong enough. You're not offending them. You're offending me, and that's okay. I'll take it. It's true.
Whoops, sorry.
I was so trashy, I didn't know it was a good school. Like, that's like a me burn. But Kathleen Cleaver, her family, it was a good school. She was middle class. Yeah, she went to Oberlin. She went to Barnard, which is also like a good kind of school.
Oh, I don't know any of those colleges besides Oberlin.
Yeah, right. But she eventually, while she was going to school, she got more interested in activism on campus than the actual classes. So she ended up dropping out of college for a while, and she moved to Atlanta to work with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And one of her tasks early on was to organize a Black student conference at Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee. And it was there that she met Eldridge Cleaver. And he had recently been released from Folsom State Prison. So in 1967, the year after the Black Panther Party was formed, the two got married and they moved to San Francisco to start their work with the Black Panthers. There, Kathleen became the first woman included in the party's central committee. So she had this high-up decision-making body role. She was the communications secretary. So her role was to write and make speeches nationwide and serve as this media spokesperson. So you'll see a lot of Kathleen Cleaver talking. She also ended up running for California State Assembly on the Peace and Freedom Party ticket, which is really interesting because the Black Panther Party had this tacit alliance with the Peace and Freedom Party, which was a slightly less revolutionary force, but they were mostly white socialists. And fun fact, when I registered to vote, I registered Peace and Freedom Party when I turned 18 years old. But they had some ties to Angela Davis as well, So they had this kind of tacit alliance with the Peace and Freedom Party, and Kathleen Cleaver was kind of involved in both of those. Eventually, though, she did end up divorcing Eldridge, which good for her. I imagine that was probably not a great relationship. And she enrolled at Yale and graduated with honors and a bachelor's degree in history. So she was a prominent member of the Black Panther Party as well, though, in its early stages, and definitely not someone to be overlooked, even though the Eldridge Cleaver thing, pretty gnarly. So another prominent early member of the party was someone named Bobby Hutton. So the year after the party was formed, remember it was formed in October, so it was kind of the end of the year, so pretty early on in 1967, the Black Panther Party saw their first enlisted member, who was a 16-year-old boy named Bobby Hutton. And Hutton was born in Jefferson County, Arkansas in 1950. He was the youngest of 3 children, and his family was so aggressively harassed by the KKK that in 1953, when Bobby Hutton was just 3 years old, they relocated to Oakland, California. So in December of 1966, Hutton met Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale at the North Oakland Anti-Poverty Center. And by the next year, he was signed up. He was a member. Hutton believed in the Black Panther Party program. He was a guy on the block who believed in the program. And he wanted to help make a difference in his community. So when we talk about this thing about the Black Panthers making a difference in their community, it's really interesting to look at this because they did so many tangible things. So they're getting off the ground and they start these things called survival programs. Have you ever heard of the survival programs?
Mm-mm.
Okay, yeah. So in addition to kind of doing the self-defense thing, which is where they would be armed and they would patrol certain areas, looking out for the safety of Black people against the racist and violent police force and judicial system, they also created, these survival programs for the Black community. And they made a huge difference in the lives of Black people and also just poor people who weren't Black in communities nearby Black Panther chapters. There were over 60 total survival programs, and we'll talk about some of the most successful ones. So the most famous one was the free breakfast program.
Oh, I've heard of this.
Yeah, I thought maybe you'd heard of this. Do you know what it was?
Free breakfast for, I believe, all school children in San Francisco or Oakland.
It was in Berkeley, California, so close, and it was set up for school children in 1968. And Bobby Seale and Huey P. Newton set this up early in the party's existence. And this was the first significant community program organized by the Panthers. By the end of 1969, free breakfast was served in 19 cities under sponsorship of the National Black Panther Party headquarters and 23 different local affiliates. So more than 20,000 elementary or junior high school aged kids received a full free breakfast before going to school in the morning, courtesy of the Black Panthers.
Wow.
Yeah. Another one maybe you've heard of is the free food program. Have you heard of that?
I think so.
Yeah, there's like a lot of pictures you can find on the internet of people holding bags that have the Black Panther art on them and say, free food program. And what this was like this program to supplement the groceries of Black and poor people by providing an ongoing supply of food to meet like your daily needs, as well as these like periodic mass distributions of food to reach larger segments of the community. Like people who couldn't be serviced just from like an ongoing everyday supply. So the free food program would provide people with bags of fresh food that would have things like eggs, canned fruit and vegetables, chicken, milk, potatoes, rice, bread, and cereal. And each bag would contain a minimum of a week's worth of food. And they just give these out to people who were broke in the community. Another thing that was one of their more popular programs was the Oakland Community School. Do you know about this?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, so this was an elementary school that was run out of Oakland, and this was the Black Panthers' longest running community survival program, and many people say the most successful. So it was originally called the Intercommunal Youth Institute, but it ended up changing its name to the Oakland Community School and growing to have over 150 students, including a wait list where people would even put their unborn children on the wait list to try to get into the school. And the goal of the school was to get kids on track for success. So they taught regular subjects like math and history, but they also taught things like community justice and problem solving and like critical thinking skills and working together. They used this thing called the whole body education approach, which sought to foster physical, emotional, abstract, and creative intelligence, all while integrating a restorative justice model. So a typical day for students would start out with like a 10-minute exercise program. Then they'd all get breakfast. Then there would be this like short school-wide interactive check-in. Then there were morning classes, followed by a lunch, which was always very nutritious. And then a midday kind of like 10-minute meditation period in the early afternoon, which is super cool. And then the smaller kids would get to rest, but the older kids would go to their afternoon classes. Then they would conclude with dinner. And then school vans would transport kids who were unable to like safely walk home back to their houses in the evening. And students also could participate in other programs like martial arts if they wanted, or help in the other Black Panther survival programs. So as for the whole restorative justice model, they had a justice board run by a youth committee. And these kids, who were like elementary school aged kids, would talk about harms that had occurred or issues that they ran into, and they would come up with group agreements on how to handle them, which is really cool. And this one Black Panther, Mary, described it at the time and said, they learned how to take accountability, community building initiatives, how to work through their differences, which is critical. And they would do this with no adults in the room. And so they were given the skills to just do this and were committed, And when we talk about restorative justice, it works in a way where no one is shunned and no one is stigmatized, as opposed to our criminal justice system, which, that happens. And so students would learn valuable life skills. They listened attentively and they problem solved.
Wow.
I know, little elementary school kids. It reminds me how you always talk about the show where the little kids from Japan go run errands.
Yeah, and they're fine.
And they're good.
And sometimes the adults are like, you need help, buddy? And the kids are like, no. Or they're like, can you open the door? They're so cute.
Yeah, but this is like a thing where it's like kids can do so much more than we give them credit for. I think about the kids I follow on TikTok who are like 2 and 4, and they do like all this cooking on their own. They can like make full meals. Like this kid who's 4 now, when he was 3, was like making omelets and stuff.
Yeah, I think that people don't give kids a lot of credit. Like, I mean, not that I was doing a ton of adult stuff as a kid, but I remember being like very small, like 3 or 4, and doing my own laundry.
Right. So this whole school, it was super successful. Like in 1977, after being in operation for 6 years, the California governor, Jerry Brown, and the California state legislature gave the Oakland Community School an award for having set the standard for the highest level of elementary education in the state.
Wow.
Yeah. There were other programs too. There was the People's Free Medical Center. These were free medical centers that were eventually established in 13 different cities across the country, including Cleveland, Ohio, New Haven, Connecticut, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and Los Angeles. And some of the clinics would operate in storefronts, but others would just be in like trailers or temporary structures. And they were medical centers where they would do testing for things like high blood pressure, lead poisoning, tuberculosis, diabetes. They would also do cancer detection screenings. They would do physical exams. They would treat colds and flus. And they would provide immunizations against polio, measles, rubella, and diphtheria.
Whoa.
Yeah. And usually this was done more like first aid rather than like a formally medically trained professional. But a lot of the volunteers who served in these medical centers would later go on and pursue proper medical training and become fully credentialed healthcare professionals.
Wow.
There was also the People's Free Ambulance Service, which is kind of similar, but they would provide free rapid transportation for sick or injured people without having to do these like time-consuming checks into the patient's financial status or like if they could pay for it, right? They'd just be like, okay, you need to go, we're taking you. And the People's Free Ambulance Service operated with at least one ambulance on a 24-hour emergency basis. And it would do a non-emergency basis from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. as well, just like for people who just needed regular medical care. And the ambulances were reportedly modern and comfortable, and they had these volunteers in them who were courteous and efficient and super knowledgeable. So it would just be like better than calling a private ambulance. There was also Seniors Against a Fearful Environment called SAFE. Have you heard of this one?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so this was actually a formal nonprofit corporation started by the Black Panther Party, and its goal was to prevent muggings and attacks on the elderly. So basically what happened is elderly people started to get targeted when they would go cash their Social Security or pension checks. So they'd have to go out into the world like once a month to cash these checks, and people would attack them, take the money. So senior citizens had been dealing with these muggings for years. They'd been contacting the Oakland Police Department. They'd be like, we need protection, we need help. And the police didn't do anything. They were just like, walk close to the curb, which I don't even know how that makes sense.
What? So you get hit by a car?
I have no idea like what the logic is here. Obviously, though, it doesn't matter what the logic was because it didn't do anything. So instead, this program the Black Panthers implemented offered free transportation and escort services to residents of the Satellite Senior Homes, which was like a residential complex for the elderly in Oakland, so that they could just go safely cash their checks. There was also the Black Student Alliance, which was founded in the Bay Area, and that happened when several Black student unions came together to create concrete programs to help unify the student bodies and also bring Black students closer with like the Black community outside of schools. So the Black Student Alliance in the Bay Area instituted a program for free books and supplies, a free transportation program, child care services, a financial aid program, a food program, serving like good, nutritious food at reasonable prices, and the initiation of relevant courses, along with a demand for better instructors in the classroom.
Wow.
There was also, maybe my favorite, the Black Panther newspaper. Have you ever seen the Black Panther newspapers?
Yeah, they're cool.
Oh, they're so good. So yeah, this is probably my favorite legacy of the Black Panther Party. It's this tabloid-sized newspaper that published regularly every week, starting in April of 1967. It was 24 pages long, and it was distributed nationally. So it would provide news and information about the Black Panther Party from like the national headquarters to smaller chapters that inevitably ended up developing. And it provided like an analysis of Black and other oppressed communities' perspectives in the United States, as well as in Africa and other places around the world. So they really were doing like the global kind of brotherhood of oppressed people. There were theoretical writings of party ideologies. There was general news features on any matters related to the liberation of humankind from oppression. And these newspapers were brilliant, and they were also beautifully designed. And they're just like this great source even today of political inspiration. I'll end up posting some pictures from this either on our Patreon or on our Instagram. They're just really, really gorgeous. And they were designed by Emory Douglas. You know about Emory Douglas, the artist who did them all. So he was like the illustrator and designer who worked on these papers. And Douglas cited his own influences in his art as being the Cuban Revolution, right? So we see the goals of communism carried throughout these works in a lot of ways. And Douglas was also influenced by third world Marxism. So he used a lot of imagery of like family and women and like day-to-day scenes. And it was just really poignant. Like one of his more famous images is a woman carrying a baby and a rifle on her back. And it challenges these notions of like patriarchy and femininity and what the role of a woman is in the revolution of the world. And remember, there were over 60 of these different programs. There were so many. Those are just a few. Some others included the Sickle Cell Anemia Research Foundation, which is established to test and create a cure for sickle cell anemia. There was the People's Free Dental Program, which provided dental checkups and also education on dental hygiene. There was the People's Free Optometry Program, which provided free eye care, including eyeglasses. There was the Food Cooperative Program, which established cooperative food buying to help like get costs lower. There was the People's Free Community Employment Program, which provided job placement services. There was the Shoe Program, which is just what it sounds like. It gave people free shoes. And the goal was for the shoes to be made at the People's Free Shoe Factory. Mm-hmm. So people were making them themselves. There was the People's Free Clothing Program, which did this with clothes. There was the People's Free Legal Aid and Educational Program, which gave both legal assistance and legal education to people in the community. There was the Free Busing to Prisons Program, which would transport people to see their loved ones who'd been incarcerated. There's the Free Commissary for Prisoners Program, which provided funds so that people who were incarcerated could get essential things they needed from the commissary. There was the People's Cooperative Housing Program, which gave people decent, low-cost, and high-quality housing, often with government subsidies that they figured out how to take advantage of. There was the People's Free Plumbing and Maintenance Program, which gave people plumbing and repair services for their homes. There was free pest control, where they would do things for like rats and roaches or anything else. It was like a pest that carried disease that could be a health risk. And they had child development centers, which provided 24-hour child care for infants and children aged 2 months to 3 years of age, including this like scientific program to develop physical and mental faculties at an early age, which really reminds me of that thing Cuba did with like the first however many days where
1,000 days.
Yeah, 1,000 days in Cuba, where they're like, we're going to help you raise your kid for the first, however many days, because it's like super important in these early stages to get like the childhood development going.
Yeah, it's wild how like in other countries they give you stuff when you have a baby. And here they just send you a hospital bill.
Right, we take from you.
They give you like, they're like, here's some diapers and some like little like blankets and stuff. And we're like, here's here's an invoice for $20,000.
Also, we charged you for holding your baby.
We charged you for holding your baby, and we charged you $500 for Advil, which you did not ask for.
Yeah. But a lot of these programs, especially after 1968, they were really led by women. So this kind of brings us to the role of women in the Black Panther Party. By the spring of 1967, more and more women were starting to sign up to join the Black Panther Party. The first woman to join was Tarika Lewis, who was a teenage girl and a student activist at her high school. And she joined a full year before even Kathleen Cleaver would move out to San Francisco with her husband. So Lewis had been working to establish a Black History Club at her school. And when she first went to the Black Panther Party headquarters and saw there were no women there, she was like, I demand to join. You have no women here, you need women. And this actually opened up the doors for a lot more women to join the Black Panthers. By the end of the 1960s, the majority of just the rank and file members of the Black Panther Party were women. And rank and file might refer to members who were seldom in the headlines of local papers, but they really were the backbone of the party. They held rallies, they did administrative duties, they sometimes did work armed security, they also served as organizers, and they would often, implement the community outreach survival programs. They also would help publish the party's newspaper, the Black Panther. So some prominent women, Chaka Khan.
Wow.
Yeah, musician Chaka Khan was a Black Panther in 1969 when she was a teenager in Chicago. She worked on the organization's free breakfast program for children.
Wow.
Yeah, so there was a lot of conversation about what the role of women in the party was going to be. And one woman wrote to founding member Huey P. Newton, and she said, Dear Huey, when I joined the party, I was thrilled about becoming part of an organization that believes in the equality of men and women. It bothers me that there are brothers who still view women as sexual objects. We should have no men in the Black Panther Party who feel this way, or women for that matter. So as we see, especially for 1966, this was a pretty progressive group, right? And women were still fighting for gender equality. They were like, hey, you're saying all these things are really good, it's not quite happening, we need to work on it. And obviously there's people like Eldridge Cleaver in charge, which we know, misogyny, right? But at the time, we also have to remember, like, in the 1960s, like, women were denied credit cards. Often their husbands would have to co-sign. You know, this was common practice at lots of banks. They would just refuse to issue lines of credit to women. There were no federal laws saying women could serve on juries. Many states said women were unfit for the jury pool. Some states, women couldn't access birth control at all or without the permission of, like, a husband. Yale and Princeton didn't even accept women as students until 1969, and Harvard not until 1977.
Wow.
Yeah, so for the Black Panthers to even be saying women deserve equality, and for the women in the party to feel confident speaking up and saying, hey, that's cool that you guys are saying this, but we haven't achieved it, can we do better? That was pretty revolutionary on its own, and a huge step forward, I think, in the U.S., because there was a lot of misogyny happening in the United States. So I think it's important to, like, contextualize it. Like, they were trying, but they didn't do great. And that's why some women, like Angela Davis, still saw this and thought there was too much work to be done within the party regarding gender egalitarianism. Angela Davis did work with the Black Panthers often, but she never was actually fully a Black Panther because specifically of how she saw the gender dynamics play out there.
Wow.
Yeah, so she did a lot of work with them. She worked alongside them. She's like, I believe in your message. I believe in what you're doing, but I just don't think you're there yet, and I don't want to be a part of this until you guys figure this out. So instead, she ended up taking on a leadership role with the local Communist Party, but was still active, around the Black Panthers' work, and she would give lectures and speak at their rallies and their events. So that's why lots of times when you look at ads for their rallies, they'll show, like, Kathleen Cleaver, like, all these people, like Huey P. Newton, Bobby Seale, and it'll be like, Black Panther, Black Panther, Black Panther. And then they'll show Angela Davis, but they won't say she's a Black Panther. They'll just be like, Angela Davis will be here.
Oh, interesting.
Yes,
yeah, because
exactly.
I think I assumed that Angela Davis was a Black Panther.
No, but she was a communist, and she did work with the Black Panthers a lot. So she was a revolutionary at the time. But her trajectory was a little different. You know, she ended up getting into the college circuit. She was a professor pretty early. And she was a professor who was really demonized for being a communist, for being a socialist, and for her belief systems. And she got railroaded a lot by the police and by the state and by her employer. She was fired for her, involvement with the Black Panther Party. She was fired for her political beliefs, and then she had a fight getting fired. And then, they ruled in her favor. She got her job back, and then they fired her because they were like, well, your speeches are just too politically incendiary. So they, found all these weird loopholes around it. And then, of course, she famously was, I would say, potentially framed, for a crime that occurred. She had a gun, and the weapons were, sold to a pawn shop, and somebody bought them from the pawn shop, and they had her name on them, and she was still, responsible because this crime occurred using her guns. And then this whole thing came about where, the prosecution was like, Angela Davis knew what she was doing. She gave these people her guns to do this crime, and she was in love with this man. And then, years later, Angela Davis was like, yeah, that's ridiculous because I'm a lesbian. I wasn't in love with this man, and, I didn't even know they had my gun. So it just seemed like this complicated setup, but that's when Angela Davis ended up going to prison during that whole thing. And while she was in prison, she radicalized all the Black women in prison. She taught them how to fight for their own defense and about Black liberation. But yeah, so she was kind of adjacent to all this and working in the civil rights movement at the same time, but never fully a member of the Black Panthers. So this one historian, LeBlanc Ernest, said, there was no one way to be a Black Panther Party woman. They came from all walks of life, and they entered and exited the party at different times. And we see this a lot, because Chaka Khan, I think, ran away from home. She came from this really poor background. But then Kathleen Cleaver came from this middle-class background. So there was a lot of interesting class dynamics happening within the Black Panther Party, especially for the women that came. And there was Black Panther Erica Huggins who said, when I say that women ran the Black Panther Party, I'm not bragging. It wasn't fun. It wasn't cute. It was dangerous and it was scary. The work that women did held the Black Panther Party together. If Huey were alive, he would say that. Bobby Seale is still alive, and he says that all the time. There's nobody that would refute it. It was a fact. So this is something she said, after Huey P. Newton died, when Bobby Seale was still alive. Actually, Bobby Seale might still be alive. Should I fact check that really fast?
Sure.
Bobby Seale.
If I had to guess, no?
Yeah, he's still alive. He's 86 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the last thing I saw about him, he was 80. So I was like, I'm not sure. That was 6 years ago. But yeah, he's still alive.
I always assume that everyone is dead if they're I was like, Jeff Bridges, he's dead. And my boyfriend was like, he's not. I like literally just saw him on something like, no.
No, he's dead. I can't wait till everyone assumes I'm dead. That sounds liberating. But yeah, there were other famous women who were involved in the Black Panthers too, like Assata Shakur. Mm-hmm. So she's famously the godmother of Tupac Shakur. And she actually held more militant positions in the party. Between 1973 to 1977, she was indicted 10 times and stood trial for 2 bank robberies, the kidnapping of a drug dealer, attempted murder of several police officers, and the murder of a New Jersey state trooper. And she ended up spending 6.5 years in prison for the death of one state trooper after a chaotic trial that included this like racist jury selection process. There was like admitted perjury by the trial's star witness. It was just a mess. And in 1979, she escaped from prison and she fled to Cuba, where she was granted political asylum.
Wow.
And she actually lived in Cuba when she wrote her autobiography. And I read that in high school, too.
And she lived there for the rest of her life?
She's still alive. I think she is still in Cuba, yeah. She's still there, yeah, she is.
Oh.
Yeah.
Me again with like, nope, everyone.
Yeah. Tupac's mother, Afeni Shakur, she was also a Black Panther. She specialized in raising bail money for jailed Black Panthers. And while she was pregnant with Tupac, she was arrested and jailed, facing trial on bomb charges along with 20 other people who were called the Panther 21. And they were all eventually acquitted. But she gave birth to Tupac just 1 month after being released from prison.
Wow.
Yeah, so he was really born into this Black radical Black Panther tradition. So, obviously we're hearing that the Black Panthers are running into some legal trouble, right? They're running into some legal trouble. And this kind of leads us to this whole thing about how the United States government responded to the Black Panthers. So we've already heard there's some tension, maybe some targeting going on. Maybe they're being targeted. And yeah, that's true. That's because the U.S. government did not respond well to them at all. So if you listen to our episode number 35, the FBI Man in Your Computer, we talked a lot about the FBI's COINTELPRO. You remember that, Kenna?
Yes.
That was their counterintelligence program targeted at U.S. civilians. And it was originally created in 1956 to frame and sabotage communists in the United States, right?
Yeah, it's all about commies.
It's always about commies. Remember, the CIA, their job was to frame and sabotage communists abroad in other places in the world. But the FBI's job was to deal with that here, locally, in the U.S. borders. However, as the civil rights movement grew, the FBI director at the time, J. Edgar Hoover, shifted COINTELPRO to also target Black activists. And he was like, look, this program's goal is to expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, neutralize, or otherwise eliminate them. That's a direct quote, which is pretty terrifying. Because it's like, neutralize or eliminate.
It's like what you're like, so murder.
Yeah, so the FBI's job is to murder people who don't agree with capitalism.
Yeah, I feel like saying like neutralize someone is like, I feel like there was like a George Carlin joke. It's like, there's no like moving truck anymore, or it's like a mover, that they're relocation specialists.
Yes, neutralize is just a fancy way of saying you're going to kill people who don't agree with you.
Yeah.
And our government actively saying this, that they're going to neutralize U.S. citizens if they're too much of a threat to power structures like capitalism and white supremacy, this is wild to me. And I think about this a lot, because a lot of times Americans will be like, I have free speech, like at least I'm allowed to dissent or critique the government, And this is so interesting because I'm like, kind of.
You know what? I feel like I remember in high school. I don't know why I only remember high school history. I do remember there's like a sedition act where basically like if you say some shit, you can get arrested.
Yeah. So basically the thing is we can say whatever we want as long as too many people don't start listening.
Yeah.
So, I mean, not whatever. There's a few things you can't say, but you can say mostly whatever you want. You can have political ideas. But if you get too successful, the FBI's job is literally to neutralize you.
And, neutralize. They just shoot you with a stun gun.
Yeah, they just neutralize
They shoot you with a laser.
Yeah.
And so it's just so you can't move anymore.
Right. And that's why too, like, you'll hear some people like critique China and be like, well, in China, they can't say anything bad about the government. And I'm like, do you know what the FBI did to the Black Panther Party here? Like, do you know? And we'll get into it, But yeah, the FBI's COINTELPRO, founded to fight communists, then modified to fight black activists. To them, the Black Panther Party, a group of black communists, they were shitting bricks over this. They were just what the fuck? This is like the ultimate threat. So as Una Taylor, who's a professor of African American Studies at Berkeley, says, the threat of communism became a way in which to undermine black radical movements. And Jesse Silva, a federal government information librarian, said it was like a double evil. Communists are evil, black nationalism is evil. Put them together, it's the ultimate evil. They just tried to throw in whatever they could to make it stick. And looking at it now, it doesn't make any sense. So COINTELPRO did everything in their power to try to disrupt the Black Panther Party because of this. I mean, God forbid somebody give kids food and free medical care, right? Oh no, the ultimate horror. But yeah, they did this. They even once broke into a space where the free breakfast program was being hosted, and they were storing food, and it was supposed to happen the next morning. So they broke in the night before, and they destroyed all the food and peed on it.
What?
Yes.
Why pee? I mean,
just wild, just very immature, just wild. They literally urinated on the food so poor people couldn't get free food.
Whoa.
Yeah, and they talk about.
Yeah, that's someone licking your food so you can't eat it, and you're just what the fuck, man?
Yes. Yeah, and the reason is that these programs were a threat to power structures of the United States. They were a threat to capitalism, right, which allows the rich to get rich, charging good money for these things that the Black Panther Party was just giving away for free. It was a threat to white supremacy, which kept black people and other marginalized people oppressed and under control, sent to U.S. prisons to perform slave labor for major corporations, or kept on the fringes of society so white people could amass more wealth at their expense. So the FBI's COINTELPRO starts to do all sorts of shit to fuck with the Black Panthers. They start spreading disinformation. They send forged letters between chapters. They pit the leaders against each other. They raid their offices. They put spies in everywhere in local chapters. They start pumping these fake stories to news outlets across America, just false information talking about what the Black Panthers are. And this lasts years. And this is a major, major effort on the FBI's part. And local news outlets, they bit in. They took it. They started to paint the Black Panthers as thugs. That's the word they would use, which is obviously a highly racialized term. And, there were images of the Black Panthers walking around with guns for self-defense, and that helped fuel these stories, allowing, white Americans to totally misunderstand the Black Panthers completely. So all the reporting at the behest of the FBI that was put out about the Black Panthers was super racist, really unbalanced, and didn't really talk about the reality of the Black Panthers and what they were about. And Bobby Seale in particular hated this. So he once said, "That pissed me off. I ain't no damned thug. I worked as an aerospace electronics for 3.5 years. I worked on the Gemini missile program, brother. I was a person with a profession, and I loved my job. I'm a human being. I'm here fighting for constitutional civil rights for my black folks and all humanity. Power to the people. That's where I come from." And files revealed in the 1970s showed that on top of all of this, they also planned assassinations for key Black Panther Party leaders. The FBI did. And the government had files containing directives to destroy, in particular, the Black Panther Party's Breakfast for Children program, because that's the only thing the Black Panther Party did that nobody could make look bad. How do you make that look bad? Yeah. So this was the thing that even these news outlets who were the Black Panthers are thugs, white Americans would read that and be I see them with guns. I'm racist. Yes, they're thugs. But then they'd be oh, and they give free food to school children in the morning. That, there's well, maybe they're not so bad. So, the FBI was we have to destroy this because there's no way to spin this. This is just purely good and we have to ruin it. And that's why they specifically tried to target anything related to giving away free food and destroy it. And they also did try really, really hard to disrupt the distribution of the Black Panther Party newspaper because it was gaining in circulation and spreading stories and asking questions. So also, this is just really interesting. The FBI was actually involved with the Black Panther Party since the very beginning, since it was first founded. The day almost it was founded. And this is before they knew how successful it would become. But the reason they were involved from the jump is because they had this like Bay Area activist named Richard Aoki. Have you ever heard of this guy?
Mm-mm.
He was this renowned socialist activist in the Bay Area. He was really lauded for all of his like leftist work in his life. And it didn't come out until after he died that he was actually an FBI top informant.
Whoa.
Yeah, and he did so much activism work in the Bay Area. And he originally sold Bobby Seale and the Black Panther Party their first weapons for their community defense program.
Wow.
Yes.
Well, probably from the FBI?
I'm not sure what the connection was. What we do know is that Aoki was considered a top-level asset, and he instantly was like, hey, I sold these weapons to these people. I have all sorts of access. And the FBI in their files noted that he had key access to Black Panthers and could get them all the info they needed. So he might not have been ordered to do it, but he might have seen an opportunity, done it, and then told the FBI, hey, there's this new group forming, and I can get you all the info you need. So the way this ended up happening is that he attended Merritt College as well, where the Black Panther Party was founded. And he befriended Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale. And documents reveal 5 instances in particular in which Aoki gave information on the Panthers to the FBI between May and November of 1967, so pretty early on. Because remember, they were founded in October of 1966. So within less than 6 months, he was in there giving info. And early on, Aoki told the FBI that the Panthers were formed as a militant Black political organization to combat police brutality, as well as to unite Black youth to determine their own destiny and educate Black people on African history. And Aoki reported that the Panthers' political philosophy did include ideas from Mao, Malcolm X, and the writer Frantz Fanon. So, this is just the documents we have. He could have been involved even earlier, but Bobby Seale did confirm that, yes, they bought their first weapons from Aoki. And Bobby Seale confirmed this when he did not know Aoki was an FBI informant. Because like I said, this guy had a really good reputation. When it came out after his death that he was an FBI informant, people were shocked. He had won like awards for his activism work.
Whoa.
Yeah, within like the socialist community. And so this is what's kind of going on in the early stages of the Black Panther Party. We have charismatic leaders engaging the masses, Bobby Seale, Huey P. Newton. We have really good community work being done by party members, things that actually are making a difference in people's lives. We have some bad apples thrown in the mix, like Eldridge Cleaver. We have women hyper involved, but also talking about, misogyny that's still going on behind closed doors, fighting to fix that. We have this modified version of Marxist-Leninism, heavily inspired by Mao, but also Black nationalism. And we have the FBI with their hands in as much of this as they can get as soon as possible, from the jump, in all these covert ways, trying to figure out how to make sure this doesn't catch on and doing their best to sabotage the Black Panthers at every opportunity. So, from here on, we're going to do kind of this like a linear kind of story of what develops over the years that the Black Panthers exist. So they're founded the end of 1966. And in 1967, this thing happens with the NRA. Do you know what happened with the NRA and the Black Panthers?
I don't quite remember, but I feel like it has something to do with it's okay to have gun control for the Black Panthers,
yes,
but not anybody else.
Basically, yes. So around a year after the Black Panther Party is founded, people are kind of starting to freak out. They're like, oh, these Black people are walking around with guns, right? And they're just armed. They're armed. They're doing public carry, and they're out there, and they're like, yeah, we're defending our communities. Like, if you mess with us, we'll mess back. Like, we're not going to be society's punching bags anymore. We are defending ourselves from these violent racist police officers. We've taken matters into our own hands. And people are so freaked out that, yes, the NRA, the National Rifle Association, starts supporting gun control because of this.
Whoa.
Yeah. The NRA is like, whoa, guns are only okay when white people have them. And there's actually these like really good visuals in the Black Panther Party newspaper that show like white families holding guns. And the Black Panther Party newspaper is like, they're armed, are you? And it's really, really good because it points out the hypocrisy of this idea that the Second Amendment is like, yeah, we love guns if you're white. If you're Black, the country hates guns. So this is something everybody's acutely aware of. There's some hypocrisy happening here with how Americans, and in particular conservative white Americans, are relating to the idea of bearing arms. How committed are you to the right to bear arms? Because now Black people are starting to do it, and white people are losing their shit. So And the NRA starts supporting this thing called the Mulford Act, which is this act that's seeking to ban open carrying of loaded firearms in California. And Ronald Reagan starts to support this. He's like the governor at the time. And he's like...
Fucking Reagan.
Yeah, he's like, I'm trying to host 8th graders to eat fried chicken for some, like, promo event. And while he's doing this, the Black Panthers show up, fully fucking armed, open carry to protest the Mulford Act. And the wildest thing is just that afternoon, just that same day that they showed up for this event, Reagan had told a group of reporters that he saw no reason why on the street today a citizen should be carrying loaded weapons, which is so not the right-wing agenda, right?
Yeah.
He's just like, all of a sudden they're freaked out and they're like, no, we don't need open carry. And the Black Panthers, show up with a bunch of loaded weapons. They're like, oh, really? Like, here we are. And this law, the Mulford Act, it actually passed in California and it is still on the books today. That is the reason we don't have open carry laws about guns here.
Yeah, I feel like California is very strict with guns. Like, you have to have a concealed carry permit if you want to, like, basically transport a gun.
Yeah, we also have things like the high velocity, like, clips you're not allowed to use. The ones that, like, have, like, more like bullets in the clip you can't do. We don't have like assault rifles here. We do have a lot of gun control here. But I just think it's interesting that the open carry law specifically came from white Californians being terrified of the Black Panther Party.
Yeah, I knew this actually.
Yeah. And I think it's super interesting too that like they really tested the right conservative white agenda. They were like, you love the Second Amendment. What if we love the Second Amendment? And white people were like, no, we love racism more than guns. Yeah. Super, super interesting. Also this year, one of the first major things that the Black Panthers take on from a political activism standpoint, besides the gun thing, is the police murder of a black man named Denzel Dowell in North Richmond, California. So basically, on Monday, April 1st, 1967, people in this North Richmond community hear 10 gunshots around 5 in the morning, right? It's a lot of gunshots. And this man, George Dowell, goes out in the street to see what happens shortly after and finds his brother lying in the street dead, shot in the back and in the head. So clearly not a threat, shot in the back. And police from the county sheriff's department are there, but there's no ambulance en route. They haven't called an ambulance. And the sheriff said that 2 deputies arrived at 4:50 a.m. on report of a burglary in process. They said they saw Denzel Dowell and another man run from the back of a liquor store, and then they evaded arrest when ordered to halt. They ran and they jumped over fences and they got away. So one deputy was like, yeah, they were running, so I shot Dowell with a shotgun and killed him with a single blast. But again, he was shot multiple times, and also somebody robbing a liquor store shouldn't be a death sentence, and he was running away from you. So why would you kill somebody in that situation? And the whole community is like, this story sounds so fake. None of this is sitting right. So they do some digging. There's no sign of entry at the liquor store, forced or otherwise. Police claim that Dowell ran from them, right, and evaded arrest and said he jumped 2 fences. But everyone in the community is like, Dowell would be physically unable to do that. He had an injury to the hip and a limp. He could not even run, let alone hop a fence, and not 2. So everyone in the community is like, no. And a doctor working the case revealed to the family in private that Dowell was shot with his arms raised above his head. Yes. So Dowell's mother then publicly proclaimed, I believe the police murdered my son. An all-white jury, though, disagreed. They called Dowell's death justifiable homicide because he was in the act of committing a supposed felony at the time that he was shot. So the first issue of the Black Panther newspaper comes out and asks, why was Denzel Dowell killed? And the Black Panthers do their own investigation into Dowell's death, and they even confront the police who were harassing Dowell's family over all of this, and they organized armed street rallies in protest. So they really start to take on this police brutality thing in a major way. And we see why the FBI was so afraid of the Black Panther newspaper, because they were using it to radicalize people in the communities and be like, hey, this is what we learned is happening. This is what's going on. They're not getting away with this stuff anymore. Someone's keeping notes. And remember, the FBI's got a pretty good control, and the CIA have pretty good control over major mainstream news outlets at the time. So to have an independent news outlet that was actually reaching people and doing its own investigation reporting that the CIA and FBI couldn't control, because Operation Mockingbird was happening at this time too. They were able to control everything in the media. This was really major and really, really scary. So by 1968, the Black Panther Party had grown from one small chapter in Oakland to more than 30 chapters spread across the country with more than 2,000 members. This is a little over a year, because they were founded in October 1966. So this is fast. So one rank and file woman in the Black Panther Party at this time was Dolores Henderson. And she talks about why she ended up joining. She's just a normal person. She hears about this. She's like, yeah, I want to be a part. She was 17 years old, and she had just graduated from high school when she heard about the Black Panthers. They started a new chapter in Sacramento, which was founded by a postman named Charles Brunson and his wife, Margot Rose. And she said that most of the other members, when she went to check it out, were college students, but she had just graduated high school and got a full-time job working at Pacific Bell. And her friend Joyce Lee invited her to check the party out. And Henderson said, I liked what they said. I wasn't having good feelings with white people in Sacramento. I was 8 or 9 when we moved there from Portland, Oregon. And as soon as I started school, I was being called a black ghost. People said, don't let them call you that. So I was fighting almost every day, getting into trouble. So in 1968, she and her friend Joyce Lee were like, yeah, we've experienced racism. We should experience liberation. And they joined the Sacramento branch of the Black Panther Party. And they would either work or donate money to help buy supplies for things like the Black Panthers school breakfast program. On weekends, Dolores Henderson said she sold newspapers, attended events, went to the firing range, and learned self-defense. And she even said that she would do armed security for certain Black Panther events. She would just hold a gun and do security. She was trained in firearms, but she would work this normal job at Pacific Bell. So one day, one of her coworkers was like, oh my God, I saw you on the news last night. And she was like, no, you didn't. And her coworker was like, no, I totally saw you on the news for the Black Panthers. You had a gun. And she was like, no, you didn't. And it was this kind of thing. It's like, she's like, I didn't keep it a secret, but I didn't want people to know because I was starting to get a lot of media attention. Also, this same year, something major happens, which is Martin Luther King Jr. is assassinated. So this was, April 1968, and Martin Luther King Jr. was famously shot while standing on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. And to this day, people still wonder how involved the FBI was in this, right? What we know is that the FBI was heavily involved in trying to sabotage King and spying on him and following him everywhere. They had wiretaps. They sent letters to King saying he should kill himself. There were these PSYOP campaigns and subterfuge. And anytime King traveled to a new city, the FBI followed him to surveil him. And also there was this weird thing where he ended up staying in a different hotel that day than he was supposed to because of all these weird circumstances, which lots of people are like, the FBI could have set this up. And in general, people just have a hard time believing that if the FBI was on his tail, which they were, they know that they were there the day it happened, they wouldn't catch the fact that James Earl Ray, the supposed assassin, would be nearby with a rifle. They had this extensive FBI observation network that included wiretaps. How would they miss this? James Earl Ray, though, did confess to the murder, but then he later recounted his confession and said he was set up by a man named Raoul. And he's like, yeah, this guy Raoul directed me to buy the gun and buy these binoculars and rent this room across the street from the motel. And Coretta Scott King, who was Martin Luther King Jr.'s widow, almost immediately was like, I think the FBI did this to my husband. Because they had been so harassed by the FBI. And there were all these internal documents from COINTELPRO talking about how Martin Luther King Jr. was a threat to national security, right? Because he was galvanizing the black people in this movement. So Coretta King said at a press conference in 1999, years later, there's abundant evidence of a major high-level conspiracy in the assassination of my husband. And that same year, in 1999, a civil suit found that local, state, and federal U.S. government agencies were involved in a conspiracy to murder Martin Luther King Jr. However, it was just a civil suit, and the King family was only awarded $100, which they donated to charity. But this is a major thing, right? Nobody kind of trusts the story when this happens. Everyone's really suspicious. People instantly think that the FBI is involved. And Carmichael, the one who first popularized the phrase Black Power, he comes out, and at this time he's like, look, you white people, you just really messed up because you killed the only guy who was aiming for a less violent or nonviolent revolution or like work in this field. The rest of us, we're young, we're angry, and we're a lot more militant than him. And you took him out, so now you got to deal with the rest of us. So this is super, super major. Everyone's really on edge, and this idea of community defense is getting more and more popular. Just 2 days after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., there's protests happening all around the country. Everybody's losing it. This is April 6th. Bobby Hutton, remember the party's first enlisted member who was just 16 when he signed up? He was shot to death by the police at just 17 years old. And he became the first member of the Black Panther Party to be killed by the police, but not the last. He was traveling with other Black Panther Party members via car. They said at the time they were confronted by the police. Someone else who was in the car was actually like, no, we saw the police and we sabotaged them. We attacked them because it was like this really on edge, all out war happening. An altercation ensued though, and 2 Oakland police officers were shot. Hutton and fellow Black Panther Eldridge Cleaver, right, fled to this nearby apartment building where they engaged in a 90-minute gun battle with the Oakland Police Department. Cleaver was wounded, then Hutton voluntarily surrendered. So Hutton stripped down to his underwear, had his hands raised in the air to prove he was unarmed. Oakland police then shot him more than 12 times, killing him as he tried to surrender. Police reports then falsely claimed that Hutton was running away and wearing a trench coat with his hands not visible, but one police officer who witnessed the shootout claimed that what the other officers did to him was first-degree murder. So, Bobby Seale later speculated that the Oakland police had mistaken Hutton for him, which is why they assassinated him, just because they're like, we don't know what black people look like. Whatever the case, Hutton's death sparked rallies and protests against police brutality, which were already going on because of Martin Luther King Jr.'s death, and his funeral was attended by 1,500 mourners, and a rally later that day in West Oakland was attended by 2,000. And Marlon Brando gave a eulogy, fun fact.
Wow.
So that same year, in August, a few months later, a group of political activists get arrested for disrupting the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. There's this series of anti-war protests going on. There's also riots that break out from them from August 25th through August 29th. And the Chicago police, armed with tear gas and billy clubs, tried to enforce this 11 p.m. curfew in the city's public parks where a lot of the protesters were camping out. Hundreds of people are arrested, including, famously, the Chicago 8. Have you heard of the Chicago 8?
I feel like I need my memory refreshed.
Okay, so the Chicago 8 were all protest leaders. I heard of the Chicago 8 because Abby Hoffman was one of them from the Yippie movement, the Youth International Party, and also Jerry Rubin, who was part of the Yippies as well. There was also Tom Hayden, who was co-founder of Students for a Democratic Society. There was David Dellinger and Rennie Davis from the National Mobilization Committee to End the War in Vietnam. There was John Froines and Lee Weiner, who were alleged to have made stink bombs, which seems pretty innocent and innocuous. And there was Black Panther chairman Bobby Seale, the only black person in the group. All 8 were tried on charges of criminal conspiracy to incite a riot, because these were pretty big kind of community organizers. Bobby Seale, though, was from the jump treated a little different than everybody else during this whole process. Like, he was denied the opportunity to choose his own counsel. And when he was in the court at one point, he was literally bound and gagged. Which now people are like, how the fuck did this happen? And the judge was like, well, he's calling me names. He said I was a fascist dog and a pig and a racist. But they're like, you don't bind and gag somebody in a court of law. Like, that's not how that happens. But whatever. The judge did it. And eventually, he removed Seale from being tried with the rest of the Chicago 8, effectively turning them into the Chicago 7, which is what they're sometimes called now. And Bobby Seale was tried alone, and he was sentenced to 4 years in prison for contempt of court from that.
4 years for contempt of court?
Yeah, for calling the judge a fascist dog, a pig, and a racist. Which he probably was, so honestly, it sounds like he was.
I'm just saying, like, you can get less time for manslaughter.
Oh, yeah. This is pretty bad. And this same year, Huey Newton, the other co-founder of the party, National Minister of Defense for the Black Panther Party, ends up getting held for assault, kidnapping, and first-degree murder charges in the October 1967 death of a police officer named John Frey. So he ends up awaiting trial in Alameda County, an overwhelmingly white area where the Black Panthers know that a black revolutionary is not going to get off like with a good trial here. There's no way. And of course, out of the 152 potential jurors who were interviewed, only 21 were black, and all but one was systematically excluded from the selection process. So we got Bobby Seale in prison for 4 years for contempt of court, and we've got Huey P. Newton being held for assault, kidnapping, and first-degree murder charges in the death of a police officer, being tried by basically an all-white jury except for one person. So when Huey P. Newton's trial began on July 15th, 1968, more than 5,000 protesters, including 450 Black Panthers, stood outside of the courthouse.
Wow.
Just being like, what are you doing? So at this time, we really see that the Black Panthers are getting targeted hardcore by the FBI. And this is also around the same time, Angela Davis during this era is getting like falsely accused of all these things. So the FBI is really doing everything in their power to set these Black Panthers up for whatever's going on. They're trying to like pull strings, be like, yeah, they're doing this. And the Black Panthers, they are a militant self-defense group. So like we saw with Bobby Hutton, sometimes they were doing militant action, like militant revolutionary action. But lots of times they were just getting like framed for things too. So by September 1968, Newton gets found guilty of voluntary manslaughter, and he's sentenced to 2 to 15 years in prison. The Free Huey movement starts to come out. Everybody's like, let him go. And this new generation of young people get galvanized to join the movement. At this time, in 1968, the average age of a Black Panther Party member was just 19 years old.
Wow.
Yes, so this is a lot of young people and a lot more militant and angry, justifiably so. So by 1969, this is where we really see one of the more egregious things that the FBI did to the Black Panthers, which is Fred Hampton. We've talked about Fred Hampton before. In 1969, the FBI set up the murder of Black Panther leader Fred Hampton. So just 21 years old, Hampton was the chairman of the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party, and he was also the deputy national chairman. He was born the youngest child of Francis and Iberia Hampton and raised in the Chicago suburbs with his brother and sister. And his family was acquainted with Emmett Till because his mom used to babysit him. Do you know who Emmett Till is?
Yeah.
Do you want to tell the story of Emmett Till really fast?
I feel like you would know better.
Okay. So basically, Emmett Till was a black teenager who in 1955 traveled from Chicago to Mississippi to just like visit relatives. And his family in Chicago was like, hey, like it's different in Mississippi. You have to be on like really good behavior. And he was like, I'm always on really good behavior. Like it's going to be fine. And while he was there, he was like outside of a store or something. A girl lied and said that he like made a pass at her, a white girl. And a group of white men like chased him down and lynched him and killed him very, very violently, very, very aggressively, horrifically. And later, years later as an adult, the girl confessed that he never did any of that. Like nothing even happened. She just said it. She just lied about it. And Emmett Till was, he was a teenager. He was so violently harmed that his mother was like, give him an open casket funeral. I want the world to see what these people did to my little boy. And this was a really huge, huge movement, that happened around Emmett Till's death. And it's really a horrific, tragic thing that happened. One of many awful stories. But because Emmett Till's mother was very, I'm not going to say media savvy, but she just like instinctively knew things to be like, no, his death has to count. Like it has to matter. And she did these things to really put it in people's faces. People are familiar with the story of Emmett Till because of that. So Fred Hampton's mom used to babysit this kid when he was a little boy. So Fred Hampton grows up in this community, really sees firsthand what racist violence against black people, what it can do, like the horrors it can cause. So he gets aware of this. And by age 15, he's already active. He's already like, something has to change. So he helps organize a student section of the NAACP at his school. And he starts protesting. He protests the unjust arrest of Eugene Moore, who was a classmate, who would later become the area's first black state representative. And he ends up graduating high school with honors and enrolls at a community college to study pre-law. So in the summer of 1967, Hampton participated in, or by some accounts even led, a series of rallies to fight for the construction of a racially integrated public swimming pool in his area. See, they had like only a swimming pool a little ways away, and it was whites only, and then you had to go like 5 more miles to like get to one where black people could go. And he had been trying to like help transport kids in the summer to use the swimming pool, and he was like, this is ridiculous, we need a racially integrated pool. So these kind of rallies ended up getting a little more hyped up. Like some store windows were broken, like a shed got set on fire, whatever, just like light property damage. But the police really took it upon themselves to like get really aggressive with the protesters because of this, and Hampton and 17 others were arrested during this. So he's really geared up to be part of this movement. So he ends up joining the Black Panthers in 1968, and he helps launch community service projects in Chicago, similar to the ones that the Panthers had initiated in Oakland, including a free medical clinic, a free breakfast program for children. He also founds this thing called the Rainbow Coalition, which is an alliance of the Black Panthers with other organizations that are based in the liberation of marginalized racial and ethnic groups. So they team up with like the Puerto Rican Young Lords Association, or the Poor White Young Patriots Organization, or the Blackstone Rangers Street Gang. And together they all start pooling their resources to help low-income citizens of every racial or ethnic background in Chicago. So he is basically this really inspiring figure to people. And this terrified the FBI. He's young, he's educated, he's ambitious, he's charismatic, he's got a good head on his shoulders, he's super moral and ethical, and he's bringing people together. And this is like everything the FBI is terrified about, right? So he's given speeches, and one of the things he said once, he's like, we've got to face some facts, that the masses are poor, that the masses belong to what you call the lower class. And when I talk about the masses, I'm talking about the white masses, I'm talking about the black masses, and the brown masses, and the yellow masses too. We've got to face the fact that some people say you fight fire best with fire, but we say you put fire out best with water. We say you don't fight racism with racism. We're going to fight racism with solidarity. We say you don't fight capitalism with black capitalism. You fight capitalism with socialism. And this is like really a movement, right? Because he is leading like the black radicals, but he's also, connecting it to other people. And this is really like, when you hear him speak, you're like, oh, this is what the FBI's been terrified of, right? He's going to bring all the poor working class together and unite them all on this front to bring socialism to America. And, again, he's super, super charismatic. So at this point, the U.S. government had multiple documents that they were citing this fear that a messiah would arise who would unify and electrify the black radical movement. This is what they were terrified of. They were always talking about this messiah is going to come about. Who could be this messiah? And FBI documents indicate that they thought Fred Hampton was going to be that messiah. So this is early on when he's starting out. He's just 21 years old. So what they do is they send in an FBI agent or an FBI informer, reporter, to infiltrate the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party under Fred Hampton. This is part of their COINTELPRO endeavors. So this FBI informant ends up getting to the point where he's the head of security for the Chicago chapter of the Black Panthers by 1969. And the FBI, the COINTELPRO thing, they were really good at infiltrating the ranks of these movements. Like, they were really good at it. So on December 4th, 1969, 14 police officers raided Hampton's apartment at 4 a.m. Mark Clark, who was just 17 years old, was shot and killed in the living room. Hampton was shot and killed while asleep in his bed. He never even woke up. His wife, who was 8 months pregnant, was also shot but survived. She stumbled out of the room with her hands in the air, and as she stumbled forward, she heard additional shots fired into her husband's body as he laid in a pool of blood. And she heard an officer say out loud, "He's good and dead now." So this points to the clear motive for the attack was just to assassinate Fred Hampton. Police officers then later tried to claim that the Panthers had started the shooting, but out of 90 total bullets fired, only one was fired by a Black Panther, Mark Clark. And experts said that it was an involuntary motion. He accidentally pulled the trigger on his own gun while his body was being riddled with bullets. Just 17 years old. All surviving occupants of the apartment surrendered peacefully. They were still arrested, and they were then charged with the attempted murder of the police and aggravated assault. Illinois Black Panther Party Minister of Defense Bobby Rush declared that J. Edgar Hoover and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, were responsible for the raid. He didn't have evidence, he just knew because they'd been so messed with by the FBI. But over the next 8 years, activists and lawyers discovered evidence that Bobby Rush was in fact correct. The FBI did play a central role in the assassination, and there was a massive cover-up attempt. The FBI was revealed to have on file, amongst other things, a detailed floor plan of his apartment, specifically identifying the bed where Hampton slept, and that came from the FBI informant. Like, the FBI informant who was placed in their chapter of the Black Panther Party had supplied to local police this diagram before the raid through his FBI control agent. So he goes to the FBI control agent, and the FBI control agent goes to the local police who did the shooting and gives them all the info. Another document, which was dated December 3rd, 1969, specifically talked about the anticipated raid on the apartment as part of a COINTEL program on the FBI's behalf. And the survivors then filed a lawsuit for violation of their civil rights, and they were awarded an out-of-court settlement of $1.8 million between them all. But yeah, this is very, very clear evidence that the FBI, the U.S. government, is murdering American citizens on American soil who have political opinions that they don't like. So this is the thing I always think about when people are like, well, at least I have freedom of speech, or at least I have the freedom to critique the government. And I'm like, Fred Hampton didn't. Fred Hampton was murdered because he was good at talking about his political belief system. That same year, there was also a UCLA shootout, which we did talk about in our COINTELPRO FBI episode. But this was when two Panthers, Alprentice Carter and John Huggins, were killed in a shootout with members of a different organization, US, which I believe, if I remember correctly, is United Slaves is what it was short for, at UCLA. So the FBI reportedly stirred this feud, sent fake documents between US and the Black Panthers, trying to get them to hate each other. And a few months later, you know, this was even more successful. Two other Black Panthers were killed as a result of the FBI amplifying this conflict, John Savage and Sylvester Bell. Later that year, John Huggins, who died at the UCLA shootout, his partner Erica Huggins was arrested alongside Bobby Seale on conspiracy charges. Erica Huggins was forced to spend 2 years awaiting trial, including time spent in solitary confinement. Ultimately, the charges were dropped. But yeah, she spent 2 years waiting for that to happen. And she later went on to become the director of the Oakland Community School, one of their programs that we talked about, from 1973 to 1981. So this gets us to 1970. Huey P. Newton's conviction gets overturned by the California Court of Appeals in May 1970, citing several mistakes, most notably that the presiding judge had a failure to properly instruct the jurors. By that point, though, Newton had also served nearly 2 years in prison at the California Men's Colony in San Luis Obispo. So he leaves the courthouse. There's throngs of supporters in front of the building. He strips off his prison-issued shirt, and he says, "You have the power, and the power is with the people." So he's like ready. He's jumping back into political activism. Also that year, he issued a statement in support of the Stonewall Rebellion in favor of gay rights, which was very cool. He said, "Homosexuals are not given freedom and liberty by anyone in society. Maybe they might be the most oppressed people in society." So we see that the Black Panther Party is really trying to stand up for anyone who's marginalized or oppressed, you know, with the exception of Eldridge Cleaver, who's pretty homophobic. But Huey P. Newton's like, no, like everybody deserves liberation. And by 1970, Black people, when polled, said that the Black Panthers were the organization most likely to increase the effectiveness of the Black liberation struggle. 2/3 of Black people polled expressed admiration for the party. So by 1970, everybody's starting to see like they're getting unfairly targeted and maligned. They're making progress. Things are taking off, though. They're going to do it. And this leads J. Edgar Hoover, then the FBI director, to proclaim that the Black Panthers are the greatest threat to the internal security of the country at the time. That same year, the Sacramento Black Panther Party headquarters, remember the one started by the postman and his wife? And we kind of heard from the woman Dolores who ended up joining because she was like, everybody in Sacramento is super racist. That headquarters gets raided by the police. Cops tear gas people inside. They shoot up the building. Nobody's killed, but the office is totally destroyed, and all the donations for things like the school breakfast program for children are ruined, which we again know was part of the FBI's goal because that was something that was really effective and they couldn't spin it in any way that made it look bad. So all the members kind of splinter off and join other nearby chapters. And also at this time, Bobby Seale, yes, and the 7 others get charged with conspiracy to incite riots from that 1968 Democratic National Convention. And this is when Seale gets sentenced to the 4 years in prison. So this kind of happens on a delayed kind of planning. This is also the year that the FBI starts aggressively targeting the Black Panther Party with attempts to breed factionalism in the ranks, right? Specifically, Eldridge Cleaver, who at this time is living in exile, and they target him. And he receives countless like forged FBI letters that are supposed to be from party members criticizing Newton, asking Cleaver to take control, being like, I don't know, I think the party's trying to remove you from power. I think Huey P. Newton hates you. But they're all like signed as people he knows. And he's totally in another country far away. And he's like, I can't verify this. So one of the forged letters in particular that we have access to at the time was written in the name of Connie Matthews, who was Newton's personal secretary. And this letter was sent to Cleaver and said, I know you have not been told what's happening lately. Things around headquarters are dreadfully disorganized, with the comrade commander not making proper decisions. The newspaper is in shambles. Nobody knows who's in charge. The foreign department gets no support. Brothers and sisters are accused of all sorts of things. I am disturbed because I myself do not know which way to turn. If only you were here to inject some strength into the movement or give some advice. 1 or 2 steps must be taken soon, and both are drastic. We must either get rid of the supreme commander or get rid of disloyal members. Huey is really all we have right now, and we can't let him down, regardless of how poorly he is acting, unless you feel otherwise. But this is from the FBI. This wasn't from Huey P. Newton's secretary at all. So Cleaver's in another country, getting aggressively targeted by the FBI. And we see that while, you know, on one hand, the Black Panther Party is really, really successful and people like they're doing a lot, the FBI is really making progress, starting to just fucking cut into it and take it down. And I see this going into 1971 as the turning point. This is like the peak. So by 1971, there are Black Panther Party branches in 68 American cities. Membership has risen to 5,000 members, and 2/3 of them are women, which is pretty interesting. Also, in 1971, George Jackson joined the Black Panther Party. He met Huey P. Newton in jail. He had been convicted of armed robbery in 1961 after stealing $70 from a gas station. He was just a teenager at the time of his arrest. And he ends up trying to escape prison and gets killed. So he had been a Black Panther Party member, though, at the time that he was murdered. And his funeral was held in Oakland, California on August 28th, 1971. And his coffin was covered in a Black Panther flag. So this is something that everybody kind of sees. This is on the news, and, you know, this gets popular, and it's like an armed kind of thing. People are protesting, trying to make sure that the funeral stays safe. Also, this same year, we see more kind of cuts start to come at the party. Huey P. Newton and Eldridge Cleaver, for example, appear on this like public live television thing together. Like Eldridge Cleaver's calling in from exile in Algeria, I think is where he is. But they end up having this really heated public debate. Because remember, Cleaver's been getting all these fake letters from the FBI saying all this shit's happening. So they end up going at odds on public TV. The two have these political opinions that seem to be splitting. Cleaver is like, we need to be more aggressive based on all the letters the FBI's been sending him. He's like, we need urban guerrillaism. We need strength. And Newton is like, I don't know. We're actually making a lot of progress. Maybe we actually should just kind of be less militant and try to work the system better within. So Newton is kind of slipping into reformism here. And this gets to be so weird and like such a strange thing that Cleaver gets expelled from the party, and he ends up forming his own Black Liberation Army paramilitary group instead. But it's pretty demoralizing. So you've got this, you've got the George Jackson funeral. At this point, we've seen a lot of people die, and public support for the Black Panthers starts to plummet, okay? So there's this infighting, there's complications amongst the party leaders. People aren't confident anyone knows what's going on or is in charge anymore. And the FBI is basically winning. Like COINTELPRO is fucking doing its job. So members within the party start to pick sides in the splinter between wanting to go with Eldridge Cleaver or wanting to stay with Newton. And, this main goal that the FBI's COINTELPRO had of turning revolutionaries against each other by doing like the factionalism thing and introducing disparate ideologies within a group, it's really working and it's really effective. And we see that this is always effective kind of in leftist movements. So by 1972, the Black Panther Party tries to kind of like reinvigorate its ranks. And most of their activity at this time actually is just centered around the community school in Oakland, which is doing really well. But they do amend their party platform. Like point 1, they add this detail saying, we believe that Black and oppressed people will not be free until we are able to determine our destinies in our own communities ourselves by fully controlling all the institutions which exist in our communities, which you can kind of see makes sense based on the success of the Black Panther Party in the community school in particular and also their medical programs. Part 3 about wanting the 40 acres and the mule that they were promised. They removed the part about the Holocaust. Point 5, they amend some of their language to not be specifically about man and men. They change it instead just to be about people. They do like the second person thing where they're like, you deserve this, you deserve this. Point 6, we no longer have the draft that was set to end in 1972. So they do away with that whole military draft thing. And instead they say, we want completely free health care for all Black and oppressed people. We believe that the government must provide free of charge for the people health facilities, which will not only treat our illnesses, most of which have come about as a result of our oppression, but which will also develop preventative medical programs to guarantee our future survival. We believe that mass health education and research programs must be developed to give all Black and oppressed people access to advanced scientific and medical information, so we may provide ourselves with proper medical attention and care. Point 7, they also rewrote this point about the right to arm themselves in self-defense, and they expanded it to not just be about Black people, but all oppressed people, saying, we want an immediate end to police brutality and murder of Black people, other people of color, all oppressed people in the United States. We believe that the racist and fascist government of the United States uses its domestic enforcement agencies to carry out its program of oppression against Black people, other people of color, and poor people. We believe it is our right, therefore, to defend ourselves against such armed forces, and that all Black and oppressed people should be armed for self-defense of our homes and communities against these fascist police forces. Point 8, they kind of changed this to be going away from being just about prison abolition for the Black community, and instead changed it to being about war in general, like combining the prison clause in the next point instead, changing number 8 to be like, we want an immediate end to wars of aggression. They're like, we believe the various conflicts which exist around the world stem directly from the aggressive desire of the United States ruling circle and government to force its domination upon the oppressed people of the world. We believe that if the United States government or its lackeys do not cease these aggressive wars, it is the right of the people to defend themselves by any means necessary against their aggressors. So this is major because this is like an anti-imperialism stance they're doubling down on. And then point 9, they amend to just kind of target the entire justice system and carceral state. Remember, this used to just be about like the jury selection process. But now they're like, no, we want freedom for all Black and oppressed people held in U.S. federal, state, county, city, and military prisons and jails. We want trials by a jury of peers for all persons charged with so-called crimes under the laws of this country. And this is kind of where they rework it to talk about like not having fair trials, the jury selection process, but also prison abolition, which is a major thing. And, we see that Black women in particular are leading the charge of prison abolition, and still to this day are. So these were really great topical shifts in the platform to keep up with the times. And they also managed to do a voter registration campaign. Remember, they were kind of getting into reformism. They're like, maybe we can work within the system. So they run this voter registration campaign in 1972 that puts several thousand new voters on the books. And this registration drive alone is considered responsible for making Lionel Wilson the first Black mayor of Oakland in 1977. But it really signified this shift in ideology away from revolutionary practices into these more reformist voting practices. And from here, we just kind of start to see the slow decline of the Black Panther Party. Like, in 1973, Bobby Seale gets released from prison and runs for mayor of Oakland on this new platform of nonviolence, which was like totally against what everything the Black Panther Party had stood for. He actually comes in second place. He ultimately loses in a runoff against the incumbent. Also, Huey P. Newton starts to struggle with addiction issues. He starts using a lot of cocaine and heroin. By 1974, Huey P. Newton actually just like purges the party completely of Bobby Seale and a lot of other leading members. And lots of party members who are loyal to Bobby Seale like resign and protest. They're just like, what's going on? And then like later that year, Newton allegedly murders a teenage sex worker named Kathleen Smith, and he just flees to Cuba, and he leaves the party in the hands of Elaine Brown. Then the next year, in 1975, Eldridge Cleaver, who remember was in exile before, makes a deal with the state, and nearly all the charges against him are dropped. He returns to the United States, and he ends up actually living here until his death in 1998. But he ends up becoming a right-wing Republican Mormon.
Oh.
Yeah,
Oh.
which is very interesting. I remember he was the one who like founded the Black Guerrilla Group, but also was a serial rapist. So I guess it's not a stretch. He's very much a misogynist. So right-wing Republican Mormon, the misogyny, I don't know. Very, very interesting. And in 1976, while the Black Panther Party is in this slow kind of death spiral, news breaks about the FBI's COINTELPRO actions against them. Like this whole story comes out. And the New York Times reports on it. And they say, the FBI carried out this secret nationwide effort to destroy the Black Panthers, including attempts to stir bloody gang warfare. between them, create these factional splits within the party. And it's interesting that this story breaks right at the time we're seeing the effects of those actions. Like, the factional splits have happened, everybody's divided, people are dead. And the Senate committee report on this ends up mentioning 4 deaths of Black Panther members specifically due to the FBI's interference. But police reports indicate that there were 2 additional ones as well. And the main goal stated in these FBI COINTELPRO documents about the Black Panthers was to drive a wedge between Panther Party leaders Eldridge Cleaver and Huey P. Newton, which we saw, yes, actually happened in 1971 when they had their divide during that televised debate. The FBI also admitted to sending bogus divisive letters between the two, and additional documents show the FBI attempting to get local gangs to kill the Black Panthers just by inciting violence and false conflict between them, which is very similar to what happened at the UCLA shootings. The FBI then had to formally apologize for how extreme their reaction to the Black Panther Party had been via COINTELPRO, which is pretty shocking to me because this is the same stuff they've been doing to other, to communists and other Black activist groups. Forever. They just had to publicly apologize because the public found out about it, right? So they were like, oh no, we did a wrongful use of power, they outright murdered people. But it was just this weird kind of for show thing. And none of it really mattered much by 1976 because as we approached the end of the 1970s, the party was dwindling in size, right? Its major leaders had been killed or were in exile due to legal troubles or had been kicked out of the party completely. Those who remained were divided into factions so small they were completely ineffective. And we really saw that the FBI was successful in its goal of destroying the Black Panther Party. By 1980, the Black Panther Party had just 27 members left.
Wow, 27.
Yeah, 27 members.
From a peak of over 5,000.
Yeah. And the Black Panther Party formally dissolved in 1982 with the closing of the last Panther-sponsored public school. And reports indicate that Huey P. Newton had been embezzling funds from the school to support his drug addiction, and ultimately he was shot to death on August 22nd, 1989 in Oakland by Tyrone Robinson, a Black guerrilla family gang member. Some people claim it was just a drug deal gone wrong because he'd been struggling with addiction later in life, but others allege maybe there was a contract out on Huey's life. So the tragic ending of the Black Panther Party, it's really heartbreaking, especially because of how much good the group did and how revolutionary it truly was. And a lot of people have tried to analyze what exactly happened, what went wrong. Some people claim that the top-down nature of the party structure didn't allow for democratic centralism like the Bolsheviks had, meaning the leaders weren't as accountable to the party members, and it relied too much maybe instead on a cult of personality that developed around the party leadership. Because remember, despite what American CIA propaganda says, all internal, even CIA documents say that the USSR was pretty democratic. A lot of these socialist groups were a lot more democratic than the US media reported that they were. So the Black Panther Party, by contrast, was more top-down rather than bottom-up than some of the other kind of revolutionary movements had been around the world. Some people also speak to the disparity between preaching for women's rights in particular while allowing misogyny to run rampant and leading men like Eldridge. Some people point to the ideology of the party as being too contradictory, like they were combining Black nationalism with international revolutionary ideologies, as well as the idea of socialism with one state, which usually conflicts with international working class kind of movements. And all this was complicated by ideas regarding the lumpen proletariat versus the working class, and the average party member just wasn't privy to that much theory and didn't really have the ideology to inspire them. Black Marxists in particular point sometimes to cliques within the party and interpersonal rivalries, which were all exacerbated by the FBI's COINTELPRO measures. Like Bobby Seale in particular said in 1996, they came down on us because we had a grassroots real people's revolution, complete with the programs, complete with the unity, complete with the working coalitions. We were crossing racial lines. That synergetic movement of all power to all the people, down with the racist pig power structure. We were not talking about the average white person. We were talking about the corporate money rich and the racist jive politicians and the lackeys, as we used to call them, for the government who perpetuates all this exploitation and racism. So, maybe they were so successful that they had no choice but to be aggressively targeted by the FBI and COINTEL program because the capitalist state is going to protect itself no matter what the cost. So it's possible they were a victim of their own success. But the truth is, it was probably some combination of all of these things, right? One of the other legacies of the Black Panther Party is how the FBI and federal government respond to civil rights movements today. Like, COINTELPRO officially ended in the 1970s when it was exposed, but in 2017, a leaked report from the FBI's current counterterrorism unit defined a security threat posed by what they called Black identity extremists, saying that perceptions of police brutality against African Americans was likely to spur lethal violence against law enforcement. So we kind of see that, like, with Black Lives Matter, we're replicating the exact same thing that happened with, kind of the FBI COINTELPRO fighting against the Black Panthers. Obviously, Black Lives Matter is a lot different. It's more decentralized. They actually work with the police a lot in some big cities. But, we see that they're kind of doing the same thing that they used to do. And the FBI was found to have an operation called Iron Fist, which is currently operating, or was as recently as 2017, which was designed to proactively address this priority domestic terrorism target by focusing FBI operations via enhanced intelligent collection efforts, including the use of undercover agents against the people they called Black identity extremists. So basically COINTELPRO.
Yeah.
COINTELPRO 2.0. Yeah.
We're not movers. We're relocation specialists.
Yeah. They jazzed up their own resume. Yeah, they're like, we're not COINTELPRO, we're Iron Fist now, which I'm like, that one sounds real Nazi. That's like, you went extra Nazi on the visuals there. But yeah, we see that the country's legacy of destroying civil rights movements is still alive and well today and is happening all around us, even as we speak. So that's our actually not very sexy episode. I'm sorry about the Black Panther Party.
No, I very much enjoyed learning more about it.
It's very interesting and sad and beautiful and tragic and all of the things, because there's I think so much is so inspirational about what they did for their communities.
Yeah, and that movie, Judas and the Black Messiah, like the visuals of it, really, they to me, it really painted a picture of why he was so threatening to the FBI and the status quo.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was, bringing people together. He was so, charming and, just so sad, that the potential was cut so short.
Yeah. I mean, and it is just wild to me how little I think the average American knows or realizes about the power that our government has over us. If you got too successful with a message the government didn't like, they could break into your house in the middle of the night, shoot your pregnant wife, and kill you.
Yeah, and, you hear stories today, too, of, different protest group, and they'll be like, this guy, Jimmy, was one of the best, we ever had, and then they find out he's an FBI informant, still to this day.
I mean, that happened, I think I talked about this before on the podcast, but growing up in Fresno during the anti-war movements after 9/11, we had a group called Peace Fresno, and they were infiltrated with an undercover agent, and they found out because the guy died in a motorcycle accident, and they published this picture in the paper being officer blah blah killed in blah blah, and everybody from Peace Fresno was like, that's not a police officer, that's Greg or whatever his name is, I don't know. And that's how they found out they'd been infiltrated by an undercover operative. So, it's kind of like a joke in leftist spaces where you're like, are you a Fed? Are you an FBI agent? Are you a CIA agent? But it's really, really, really common.
Yeah, and it's just you kind of see what the government's true purpose is with all this. It's to uphold capitalism and white supremacy.
And protect power.
Mm-hmm. It's not, that's why I think it was so ironic and, so purposeful that they used the Declaration of Independence, because, it's if you believe in the United States mission statement, which is, the pursuit of happiness, the pursuit of freedom,
equality, life, liberty,
this is not it.
Right.
Because, if we're going to say, what we're doing is exactly, or, what the government is doing is exactly the opposite of the Declaration of Independence, if you want to get into it. Which is, what blows my mind when people call themselves patriots and,
Yeah, right. It's very contradictory. It's a very hypocritical system. Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I'll probably post some things from the Black Panther Party newspaper, either on our Patreon or our Instagram. I haven't quite decided yet. But there's some good content. There's some good photo content. I'll post on either one. There'll be a little bonus content on our Patreon either way. I'm not quite sure what it'll be. But I don't know. Do you have anything else you want to add about the Black Panther Party for self-defense?
No, although I do highly recommend that movie.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, everybody, that our 69th episode failed to be horny for you. Maybe 169, though. We'll give it another shot.
Or whatever 69 times 2 is. I'm bad at math.
Oh, 138.
Yeah. Ooh, episode 138.
Sexy.
Yeah.
Sexy.
Double sexy.
Double sexy. It'll be just something you know if you were here early enough.
Yeah.
It'll be our little inside secret.
Hee hee.
Hee. Thanks so much for listening to another episode of Pick Me Up, I'm Scared. If you would like to join us on Patreon, you can find us at patreon.com/pickmeupimscared. And like always, all of our sources will be in the show description if you just scroll down a bit. Our Patreon is currently starting at $2 per month, but if that's too much money for you, we totally get it, and we're just happy you're here.